Hello friends. Did you know nearly 80% of those who watch my videos aren't subscribed? If you enjoy these stories, please hit that subscribe button and leave a like. It really helps. Thank you for being here. By the way, where are you watching from? Let me know in the comments. I've been driving trucks for 23 years now, and I thought I'd seen everything this job could throw at me. Ice storms in Montana that turned the highway into a skating rink, brake failures on mountain passes, even a tornado that touched down 2 miles ahead of me in Oklahoma, close enough that I could see debris swirling in the funnel. I've had close calls, sure, but I always made it through. I always had an explanation for what happened, some rational way to process it and move on. What happened on US 191 in Wyoming 3 months ago, I still don't have an explanation. And the worst part is I'm not sure I want one. My name is Caleb Rourke. I'm 47 years old, divorced, no kids. I haul refrigerated goods mostly, produce frozen foods, sometimes pharmaceuticals, across the western states. It's a solitary life, which suits me fine. I've got my CB radio for company when I want it, my audiobooks when I don't, and the road stretching out ahead of me like a promise that never quite gets kept. The run that changed everything was supposed to be routine. I'd picked up a load of frozen vegetables in Idaho Falls, destination Salt Lake City. It wasn't a long haul, maybe 6 hours if I pushed it, but I'd been fighting a headache all day and decided to take it slow. I left Idaho Falls around 8 p.m. on a Tuesday in late September. The weather forecast had mentioned possible fog in the mountain passes, but nothing that seemed worth worrying about. I remember the sunset that evening. It was one of those Wyoming sunsets that makes you understand why people write poems about the sky. Layers of orange and pink and purple stacked up like God was showing off. The temperature was dropping fast, though, the way it does in the high country once the sun goes down. By the time I crossed into Wyoming proper, it was full dark, and my thermometer was reading 38 degrees. US 191 through western Wyoming is not a heavily traveled route, especially at night. It cuts through some of the most remote country in the lower 48, miles and miles of sagebrush and rock, with the Wind River Range rising up to the east like a wall of shadows. There are stretches where you won't see another vehicle for an hour or more. Cell service is spotty at best. If you break down out there, you'd better hope your CB works, because otherwise you're in for a long, cold wait. I didn't mind the isolation. In fact, I preferred it. Give me an empty highway over rush hour traffic any day of the week. There's a kind of peace in the solitude, a rhythm to the drive that gets almost meditative after a while. Just you and the truck and the white lines disappearing under your wheels. Around 10:30 p.m. I started hitting patches of fog. Nothing too bad at first, just wisps of it drifting across the road like smoke. But within 20 minutes it had thickened into something more substantial. The kind of fog that swallows your headlights and spits them back at you, making it hard to see more than 50 feet ahead. I slowed down to about 40 miles per hour, turned on my flashers, and kept my eyes locked on the center line. That's when the CB crackled to life. Static mostly, but underneath it I could hear someone talking, their voice faint and distorted. I reached over and adjusted the squelch, trying to clean up the signal. For a moment, it got clearer. A male voice, older, sounded like he was asking about road conditions ahead. I waited for someone to respond, but there was nothing. Just more static. Then the voice cut out entirely, and the channel went dead. I didn't think much of it. CB signals can be weird in the mountains, bouncing off rock faces, getting tangled up in the weather. I'd heard stranger things come through that radio over the years. I turned the volume down and focused on the road. The fog was getting worse. It rolled across the highway in thick waves, so dense in places that I couldn't see the road at all, just the vague glow of my headlights reflecting back at me. I was down to 30 miles per hour now, maybe less. My hands were tight on the wheel, my eyes straining to pick out anything solid in the murk. Every few seconds, a gust of wind would tear a hole in the fog, giving me a brief glimpse of the highway ahead before it closed up again like a curtain. It was during one of those brief clearings, around 2:30 in the morning, that I saw her. She was standing in the breakdown lane, maybe 100 yards ahead, right at the edge where the asphalt met the dirt shoulder. Just standing there, motionless, facing the road. I couldn't make out much detail through the fog, just her outline, a dark shape against the swirling gray. She was wearing what looked like a long coat or dress, something that hung down past her knees. Her arms were at her sides. My first thought was that she'd broken down, that her car was somewhere nearby and she was trying to flag down help. But as I got closer, I realized there was no car. No vehicle at all. Just her, standing there alone in the middle of nowhere at 2:30 in the morning. I slowed down even more, my foot hovering over the brake. Part of me wanted to stop, to see if she needed help. But another part of me, the part that had learned to trust my instincts over 2 decades on the road, was telling me something wasn't right. Why would anyone be standing out here in the fog, in the middle of the night, miles from the nearest town? I was maybe 30 yards away when I got my first clear look at her. The fog had thinned just enough to see her more clearly, and what I saw made my stomach tighten. She was facing the road, but her head was tilted down, like she was staring at the ground. I couldn't see her face. Her hair hung down in front of it, long and dark, completely obscuring her features. She wasn't moving at all, not shifting her weight, not looking around, nothing. Just standing there like a statue. I eased off the gas and let the truck coast past her, my eyes locked on her figure in the side mirror. She didn't turn to watch me go, didn't raise her hand or call out, just stood there motionless as I rolled by. The fog swallowed her up again within seconds, and she was gone. I told myself it was nothing. Maybe she was waiting for someone. Maybe she'd had a fight with her boyfriend and stormed off, and now she was cooling down before going back. People do strange things when they're upset. It didn't have to mean anything. But I couldn't shake the image of her standing there, head down, hair covering her face, perfectly still in the swirling fog. Something about it felt wrong, staged almost, like she'd been placed there. I kept driving, my eyes flicking between the road ahead and the mirrors behind me. The fog was still thick, still playing tricks with the light. I turned the CB back up, thinking maybe I'd call it in, let someone know there was a woman standing alone on the highway. But before I could key the mic, I saw her again. She was ahead of me. Same spot, same position. Standing in the breakdown lane, head down, arms at her sides. I hit the brakes harder than I meant to, and the truck lurched forward, the trailer fishtailing slightly before the weight settled. I sat there, staring through the windshield, my heart pounding in my chest. It couldn't be the same woman. I'd just passed her maybe 2 minutes ago. There was no way she could have gotten ahead of me, not on foot, not in this fog. But it looked exactly like her. Same coat, same posture, same long dark hair. She was standing in the exact same position, like she hadn't moved at all. I reached for the CB mic, my hand shaking slightly. Breaker 19. This is Roar calling southbound on 191. Anyone out there reading me? Static, nothing but static. I tried again. Breaker 19, looking for a radio check. Anybody copy? Still nothing. I looked back at the woman. She was still there, motionless. The fog was swirling around her like it was alive, parting and closing, parting and closing. I wanted to stop. I wanted to get out and see what the hell was going on. But every instinct I had was screaming at me to keep moving, to get away from this stretch of road as fast as I could. I eased the truck forward, crawling past her at maybe 10 miles per hour. My eyes were glued to her as I went by, waiting for her to move, to do something. But she just stood there, head down, face hidden. I couldn't even tell if she was breathing. As soon as I was past her, I hit the gas, pushing the truck up to 50. Fog be damned. I didn't care if I couldn't see. I just wanted distance between me and whatever that was back there. I drove for another 10 minutes, my knuckles white on the wheel, before I started to calm down. The fog was beginning to thin out, and I could see the road more clearly now. The wind had picked up, tearing holes in the mist, and the stars were starting to peek through overhead. I took a deep breath and tried to think rationally. Maybe it wasn't the same woman. Maybe there were two of them and I'd just happened to come across both of them on the same stretch of road. It was possible. Unlikely, but possible. Or maybe I'd gotten turned around in the fog somehow, doubled back without realizing it. That happens sometimes in bad weather. Your sense of direction gets screwed up, but even as I tried to convince myself, I knew it didn't add up. I'd been watching the mile markers. I hadn't turned around. And the chances of two women standing in the exact same position, wearing the exact same clothes on the same deserted highway in the middle of the night, that was too much to swallow. I glanced down at the dash cam mounted on my windshield. I'd installed it about a year ago after a close call with an insurance scam, and I'd been running it ever since. If there was something out there, the camera would have caught it. I made a mental note to check the footage when I stopped. The highway stretched out ahead of me, empty and dark. The fog was mostly gone now, just a few lingering patches here and there. I could see the mountains rising up on either side, black shapes against the slightly less black sky. The road was straight for miles, cutting through the valley like a scar. I was starting to relax when I saw the lights. They were behind me, distant but gaining fast. Headlights, bright white, cutting through the darkness. I watched them in the mirror, trying to gauge their speed. They were moving fast, maybe 70 or 80 miles per hour. Too fast for these conditions. I kept my speed steady and moved over to let them pass. But as they got closer, I realized something was off. The lights were too high, too bright. They looked like high beams, but there was something else, something wrong about the way they were moving. They were swaying slightly side to side, like the vehicle was drifting across the lanes. I tensed, my hands tightening on the wheel. Drunk driver, maybe. Or someone falling asleep at the wheel. Either way, I wanted them past me as quickly as possible. I eased over to the right, giving them plenty of room. The lights got closer, and then suddenly they swerved hard to the right, cutting across both lanes and disappearing off the side of the road. I watched in the mirror, waiting for the sound of a crash, the flash of brake lights, something. But there was nothing. The lights just vanished, like they'd been switched off. I slowed down, peering into the darkness behind me. There was no sign of the vehicle. No headlights, no taillights, nothing. Just empty road. I pulled over onto the shoulder and put the truck in park. My hands were shaking again. I sat there for a moment, just breathing, trying to make sense of what I'd just seen. A vehicle had been behind me. I'd seen the lights. They were real. But where did it go? I grabbed my flashlight from the door pocket and climbed out of the cab. The air was cold, biting through my jacket, and the wind was howling across the open valley. I walked to the back of the trailer, shining my light down the road behind me. Nothing. No skid marks, no broken glass, no sign that anyone had gone off the road. I walked back to the cab and climbed in, pulling the door shut behind me. I sat there in the darkness, listening to the wind rattle the windows, and tried to think. The woman on the side of the road, the disappearing headlights, the dead CB. None of it made sense. None of it added up. I thought about turning around, about heading back to Idaho Falls and scrapping the run. I could call dispatch in the morning, tell them I'd had mechanical trouble, take the hit on my record. But that felt like giving up. and I've never been the type to give up. I put the truck in gear and pulled back onto the highway. The road was clear now, the fog completely gone. I could see for miles ahead, the highway stretching out like a ribbon under the stars. I pushed the truck up to 60 and tried to focus on the road. I'd been driving for maybe 20 minutes when I saw her again. This time, she was standing in the middle of the road, right in the center of the southbound lane, facing me. Her head was still down, her hair still covering her face, but now she was closer, close enough that I could see details I hadn't noticed before. Her coat was old, threadbare. Her hands were pale, almost white in the glow of my headlights. I slammed on the brakes, the truck shuddering as the ABS kicked in. I was maybe 50 feet away when I came to a full stop. I sat there, staring at her through the windshield, my heart hammering in my chest. She didn't move, didn't flinch, just stood there, perfectly still, as if she'd been waiting for me. I reached for the CB mic again, my hand trembling. "Breaker 19, I need help. There's someone on the road. I need police or highway patrol or someone. I'm on 191 southbound, mile marker." I glanced at the dashboard, trying to remember the last marker I'd passed. "Mile marker 83, please, if anyone can hear me, I need help." Static. Nothing but static. I looked back at the woman. She was still there, still motionless. The wind was whipping her coat around her legs, but she didn't seem to notice, didn't react. I honked the horn, 3 long blasts, hoping it would snap her out of whatever trance she was in. But she didn't move. I sat there for what felt like hours but was probably only a minute or two. I didn't know what to do. I couldn't just sit here all night. But I couldn't drive forward either, not with her standing right in front of me. Finally, I put the truck in reverse and started backing up. I kept my eyes on her through the windshield, watching for any movement, any sign that she was going to do something. But she just stood there, growing smaller and smaller as I backed away. When I'd put about 100 yards between us, I stopped. I sat there, engine idling, trying to decide what to do next. And that's when she started walking. She moved slowly, deliberately, her head still down. She wasn't walking toward me. She was walking off the road, toward the shoulder, toward the darkness beyond. I watched her go, my breath caught in my throat. She reached the edge of the asphalt and kept walking, stepping off into the dirt and sagebrush. And then, just like that, she was gone, swallowed up by the darkness. I sat there for another minute, waiting to see if she'd come back, but the road stayed empty. The night stayed silent. I put the truck back in drive and crept forward, my eyes scanning the shoulder where she'd disappeared. There was nothing there. No footprints, no sign that anyone had walked through. Just empty ground. I kept driving. I didn't stop again. Not until I was out of Wyoming entirely. Across the border into Utah, pulling into a Flying J just outside of Evanston. It was almost 6 in the morning by then, the sun just starting to creep over the horizon. I parked in the back of the lot, away from the other trucks, and sat there in the cab, my hands still shaking. I pulled out my phone and started going through the dash cam footage. I rewound it to the first time I'd seen her, standing on the side of the road. I watched the video carefully, frame by frame, and that's when I saw it. She wasn't there. The breakdown lane was empty. The fog was there, the road was there, but she wasn't. I rewound it again, watched it again. Still nothing. I fast-forwarded to the second sighting where I thought I'd seen her ahead of me. Again, nothing. Just empty road. I checked the third sighting when she was standing in the middle of the lane. The camera showed the highway stretching out ahead of me, clear and empty. I checked the timestamp. I checked the settings. The camera was working fine. It was recording everything else, the fog, the road, the mile markers. Everything except her. I sat there staring at the screen, my mind racing. I'd seen her. I know I'd seen her. She was as real as the steering wheel in my hands, as real as the road beneath my tires. But the camera saw nothing. I put my phone down and leaned back in the seat, closing my eyes. I didn't sleep. I couldn't. I just sat there listening to the sound of trucks coming and going, the hum of diesel engines, the chatter of voices. Normal sounds. Real sounds. When the sun was fully up, I went inside and bought a coffee. My hands had finally stopped shaking, but I still felt off, like I was walking on a floor that wasn't quite level. The cashier asked if I was okay, said I looked pale. I told her I was fine, just tired. She didn't look convinced. I went back to the truck and sat there for another hour, sipping my coffee and trying to make sense of what had happened. I thought about calling the Wyoming Highway Patrol, reporting what I'd seen. But what would I tell them? That I'd seen a woman who didn't show up on camera? That she'd appeared in 3 different places over the course of an hour? They'd think I was crazy. Hell, I was starting to think I was crazy. Finally, I started the engine and pulled out of the lot. I still had a delivery to make. Still had a job to do. I got on I-80 and headed toward Salt Lake City, keeping my speed steady, my eyes on the road. The morning was clear and bright. The sky a perfect blue. Everything looked normal. Everything felt normal. But I couldn't stop thinking about her. About the way she'd stood there, motionless, head down, hair covering her face. About the way she'd vanished into the darkness. About the way the camera hadn't seen her at all. I made my delivery on time, dropped the load, signed the paperwork. The warehouse guys chatted with me about the weather, about football, about nothing in particular. I smiled and nodded and played along, but my mind was somewhere else, somewhere dark and foggy, on a lonely stretch of highway in Wyoming. I didn't tell anyone what I'd seen. Not my dispatcher, not the other drivers I talked to on the CB. I kept it to myself, locked it away like a secret I wasn't ready to share. But I started noticing things, small things, details I'd missed before. Like the way the fog had moved around her, parting and closing like it was alive. The way her coat had fluttered in the wind, but her hair had stayed perfectly still. The way she'd never once looked up, never once showed her face. And I started wondering what I would have seen if she had looked up. Wondering what was hidden beneath that curtain of dark hair. Wondering if maybe, just maybe, I was better off not knowing. 3 days passed before I took another run through Wyoming. I could have avoided it. I could have asked dispatch to route me around, south through Colorado or north through Montana. But that would have meant explaining why, and I wasn't ready to do that. I wasn't ready to put into words what had happened on US 191, because saying it out loud would make it real in a way I wasn't prepared to deal with. So when dispatch called with a load heading from Salt Lake to Billings, I said yes. Same route, same highway. I told myself I was being rational, that I was confronting an irrational fear, that whatever I'd seen that night had been nothing more than exhaustion and bad weather, and my mind playing tricks on me. I left Salt Lake at 4 in the afternoon, timing it so I'd hit Wyoming around midnight. I wanted to see the road in the dark again, wanted to prove to myself that there was nothing there, that it had all been in my head. The weather was clear this time. No fog, no wind, just a cold, still night, with stars scattered across the sky like broken glass. The temperature was down in the low 30s, cold enough that I could see my breath when I stopped for fuel in Rock Springs. I bought coffee and a sandwich and got back on the road, my hands steady on the wheel. I reached US 191 just after 11 p.m. The highway looked different in the clear weather, less threatening somehow. I could see the landscape now, the rolling hills and distant mountains, the scrub brush lining the shoulders. It looked ordinary, just another stretch of empty road. I turned on the CB and scanned through the channels, listening to the scattered chatter. Truckers talking about weather, about loads, about the best places to grab a meal. Normal conversations, comforting in a way. I keyed the mic and joined in, talking to a driver hauling auto parts to Casper, another running produce to Bozeman. We talked about nothing important, just killing time, keeping each other company on the long, dark roads. I was feeling better, more relaxed. Whatever I'd seen 3 nights ago felt distant now, like something that had happened to someone else. I'd been tired, that was all. The fog had been thick, my visibility poor. I'd seen shadows and turned them into something they weren't. It happened, nothing to be ashamed of. I was thinking about stopping for the night, maybe pulling into Pinedale and grabbing a few hours of sleep, when I passed mile marker 83. I didn't realize the significance at first. I just noticed the marker in my peripheral vision, the white numbers reflecting in my headlights. 83. And then it clicked. That was where I'd been when I'd seen her standing in the middle of the road. When I'd slammed on the brakes and sat there, staring at her through the windshield while she stood motionless in front of me. I felt my chest tighten. I forced myself to keep breathing, to keep my speed steady. There was nothing there. The road was empty. I could see for miles ahead, clear and unobstructed. Nothing but asphalt and painted lines. I was just past the marker when I saw the glow. It was faint at first, barely visible, just a soft light off to the right side of the road. I thought maybe it was a reflector or a piece of trash catching my headlights. But as I got closer, I realized it was coming from beyond the shoulder, out in the darkness where there shouldn't be any light at all. I slowed down, my eyes fixed on the glow. It was steady, not flickering, and it had a strange quality to it. Not quite white, not quite blue, something in between. Cold, that's the word that came to mind. The light looked cold. I pulled over onto the shoulder and stopped, leaving the engine running. I sat there for a moment, debating whether to get out. Part of me wanted to just drive away, to put this stretch of road behind me and never come back. But I needed to know. I needed to understand what was happening. I grabbed my flashlight and climbed out of the cab. The air was bitter cold, colder than it should have been. My breath came out in thick clouds, and I could feel the chill seeping through my jacket. I turned on the flashlight and pointed it toward the glow. It was maybe 50 yards off the road, out in the sagebrush. The light was brighter now that I was outside, pulsing slightly, like a heartbeat. I started walking toward it, my boots crunching on the gravel. The wind had picked up, cutting through my clothes, but I barely noticed. All my attention was focused on that light. As I got closer, I could see that it was coming from the ground, or rather from something on the ground. I couldn't make out what it was, just a vague shape surrounded by that cold, pulsing glow. I was maybe 20 yards away when I stopped. The shape looked like a person. Someone lying on the ground, curled up on their side, and the light was coming from them. I stood there, frozen, my flashlight beam trembling in my hand. Every instinct I had was screaming at me to turn around, to get back in the truck and leave. But I couldn't move. I couldn't look away. The figure on the ground wasn't moving. The glow was steady now, no longer pulsing, just a constant, cold light that seemed to push back the darkness around it. I took a step closer, then another. My heart was pounding so hard I could hear it in my ears. I was maybe 10 yards away when the light went out. It didn't fade, it just stopped, like someone had flipped a switch. 1 second it was there, bright and cold and impossible to ignore. The next second it was gone, and I was standing in complete darkness, my flashlight the only source of light. I swung the beam toward where the figure had been. There was nothing there, just empty ground, dry grass and rocks, and scrub brush. No body, No sign that anyone had been there at all. I turned in a slow circle, shining my light across the landscape. Nothing. The highway behind me was empty. The darkness ahead was absolute. I was completely alone. I walked back to the truck, moving fast, my breath coming in short gasps. I climbed into the cab and locked the doors, my hands shaking as I reached for the CB. I needed to talk to someone, needed to hear another human voice. I keyed the mic and tried to sound calm. Breaker 19, this is Rourke on 191 northbound. Anyone out there? Static. I tried again. Looking for a radio check. Anybody listening? More static, and then, faint and distorted, a voice. Copy that, Rourke. This is Daniels westbound on 80. What's your 20? Relief washed over me. Mile marker 83 on 191. Just checking in. There was a pause, and then Daniels came back. Everything okay up there? You sound a little rattled. I hesitated. What was I supposed to say? That I'd seen a glowing body in the sagebrush? That I'd watched it disappear into nothing? Yeah, I'm fine. Just tired. Long night. Roger that. Stay safe out there. You too. I put the mic down and sat there, staring out at the empty road. The glow was gone. The figure was gone. But the feeling wasn't. That sense that something was wrong. That I'd stumbled onto something I wasn't meant to see. I put the truck in gear and pulled back onto the highway. I didn't look back. I kept my eyes forward, my speed steady, and tried not to think about what I'd just seen. But my mind kept circling back to it, turning it over and over, looking for an explanation that made sense. I drove for another hour before I saw the sign. It was one of those historical markers, the kind that dot highways across the country, telling you about battles or settlements or famous people who once lived nearby. I almost didn't stop, but something made me pull over, made me climb out and walk over to read it. The marker was old, the paint faded and chipped. It told the story of a stagecoach accident that had happened in 1892, right around this area. 7 people had died, including a young woman whose body was never recovered. The marker said she'd wandered away from the wreckage during a snowstorm and vanished into the night. Search parties had looked for weeks, but they never found her. I stood there reading the marker 3 times, the wind cutting through my jacket, my mind racing. 1892. Over 100 years ago. It couldn't be connected. It was just a coincidence, just an old tragedy that happened to occur in the same area. But I couldn't shake the image of the woman I'd seen standing on the side of the road. The way she'd been dressed, in that old coat. The way she'd moved, or rather the way she hadn't moved. The way she'd disappeared. I got back in the truck and kept driving. I didn't stop again until I reached Pinedale, and even then, I couldn't sleep. I sat in a truck stop parking lot, drinking coffee and watching the sun come up, trying to convince myself that I was reading too much into things, that there was no connection between a 100-year-old tragedy and whatever I'd seen on the highway. But I kept thinking about the dash cam footage, about how the camera hadn't seen her, even though I had, about how she'd appeared in 3 different places in the span of an hour, something that should have been impossible. When I got home 2 days later, I did something I'd been avoiding. I started researching. I looked up every accident, every disappearance, every strange occurrence that had happened on US 191 over the past 100 years. And what I found made my blood run cold. There were dozens of reports. People seeing figures on the side of the road who vanished when approached. Lights in the darkness that couldn't be explained. Vehicles that appeared and disappeared without warning. Some of the reports went back decades. Others were recent, posted on forums and social media by drivers who'd had experiences they couldn't explain. One report from 2015 caught my attention. A A truck driver named Morrison claimed he'd seen a woman standing on the shoulder of US 191 near mile marker 83. He'd stopped to help her, but when he got out of his truck, she was gone. He'd checked his dash cam, but the camera showed nothing. Just empty road, another report from 2018. A couple driving through Wyoming at night said they'd seen headlights behind them that had been following for miles. When they finally pulled over to let the vehicle pass, it had vanished. Just gone, like it had never been there. I read report after report, each one describing something similar to what I'd experienced. And the more I read, the more I realized that whatever was happening on that stretch of highway, I wasn't the first person to encounter it. And I probably wouldn't be the last. I tried to tell myself it didn't matter, that I could avoid that road, that I could take different routes, that I never had to go back to Wyoming again. But I knew it wasn't that simple. Because the thing that scared me most wasn't what I'd seen. It was what I hadn't seen. The fact that the camera had captured nothing, that there was no physical evidence, no proof that any of it had happened. It made me wonder what else I'd been seeing over the years that wasn't really there. What else I'd been driving past in the dark. Things that existed in some space between real and not real, visible to the eye, but invisible to everything else. I started paying more attention after that, to the shadows at the edge of my headlights, to the shapes that seemed to move in my peripheral vision, to the feeling I'd get sometimes, late at night on empty roads, that I wasn't alone, even though I clearly was. And I started noticing a pattern. It was always the same stretch of highway, always between mile markers 80 and 90 on US 191, always between midnight and 4 in the morning, always when I was alone. I tried talking to other drivers about it, casually bringing it up in truck stops and rest areas. Most of them brushed it off, said I was tired or stressed or seeing things. But a few, a very few, would get quiet. Their eyes would change like they were remembering something they'd tried to forget. And they'd say things like, "Yeah, that road's weird," or, "I don't run that route at night anymore if I can help it." One old-timer, a guy named Hank, who'd been driving for 40 years, pulled me aside after I mentioned it. He bought me a coffee and told me a story about a run he'd made back in the 80s. He'd seen a woman standing on the side of US 191, just like I had. Same description, same position. He'd stopped to help her, but when he'd gotten out of his truck, she was gone. He'd spent the next 20 minutes searching for her, convinced she'd collapsed or wandered off, but he'd found nothing. "I never went back to that road at night," he told me. "Not after that. I don't care what dispatch says. I don't care if it adds an extra 2 hours to my route. I'm not going back." I asked him if he'd ever figured out what he'd seen. He shook his head. "Some things you're better off not knowing. You just got to accept that there are places in this world that don't follow the rules. And that road, that's one of them." I thought about his words a lot over the next few weeks. I thought about the historical marker, about the woman who'd vanished in 1892. I thought about all the reports I'd read, all the people who'd seen something on that highway that they couldn't explain. And I thought about the way she'd looked, standing there in the fog with her head down and her face hidden. The way she'd appeared and disappeared, moving through space in ways that shouldn't have been possible. The way the camera hadn't seen her, like she existed on a different frequency, visible to some but not to others. I tried to rationalize it. I tried to find logical explanations, scientific reasons for what I'd experienced. Mass hallucination, exhaustion-induced psychosis, some kind of atmospheric phenomenon that created optical illusions. But none of it fit. None of it explained why the camera hadn't seen her, or why the same thing had been happening on the same stretch of road for over 100 years. Eventually, I had to accept that there wasn't a rational explanation. At least, not one that made sense within the framework of how I understood the world. And that acceptance, that admission that something was happening that I couldn't explain, that was the hardest part. Because it meant acknowledging that the world was stranger than I'd thought. That there were things out there, things that existed in the margins, in the gaps between what we can see and what we can prove. Things that watched us as we drove past, that stood at the edge of our perception, waiting. I still drive US 191. I still take loads through Wyoming, but I do it during the day now. I plan my routes so I'm never on that stretch of highway after dark. And when I pass mile marker 83, I keep my eyes on the road. I don't look at the shoulder. I don't check my mirrors. I just keep driving, hands tight on the wheel, until I'm clear of that area. Because whatever's out there, whatever I saw on those 2 nights, it's still there, still waiting, still standing in the darkness, head down, face hidden, watching the highway with eyes I'm glad I never saw. I thought that would be the end of it. I really did. I'd changed my routes, adjusted my schedule, done everything I could to avoid that stretch of highway after dark. For 6 weeks, it worked. 6 weeks of normal runs, normal roads, normal nights. I started to relax. Started to convince myself that maybe I'd overreacted, that maybe Hank had been wrong and I could just drive during the day and everything would be fine. Then I got the call. It was dispatch, and they had a problem. A refrigerated load of medical supplies needed to get from Salt Lake to a hospital in Bozeman by morning. The regular driver had called in sick, and I was the closest available truck with the right equipment. It was good money, urgent freight, and dispatch was asking me specifically. I almost said no. I started to explain that I couldn't do it, that I'd take any other run, but not that one. But then I'd have to explain why, and I wasn't ready to do that. Wasn't ready to tell my dispatcher that I was afraid of a stretch of highway because I'd seen things I couldn't explain. So I said yes. I left Salt Lake just after 8 p.m., the trailer loaded with time-sensitive cargo. I pushed the truck as hard as I could through the early evening, trying to make up time, telling myself that if I could just get through Wyoming before midnight, I'd be okay. I could make it through during the golden hours, the time before the dead of night set in, before whatever was out there started to wake up. But traffic was heavy heading north, and I hit construction outside of Rock Springs that ate up nearly an hour. By the time I turned onto US 191, it was already 11:30. I was going to hit mile marker 83 right around midnight. The night was clear again, no fog this time, but there was something in the air that felt different. A tension, like the atmosphere itself, was holding its breath. The temperature was dropping fast, down into the 20s, and my thermometer showed ice warnings on the overhead display. I turned the CB up loud, looking for company, for voices to fill the cab and keep my mind occupied. But the channels were mostly quiet, just occasional bursts of static and the distant chatter of drivers too far away to make out clearly. I passed mile marker 80 at 11:47 p.m. My hands were sweating despite the cold. I kept my eyes locked on the road, refusing to look at the shoulders, refusing to let my mind wander to what might be standing there in the darkness, just beyond my headlights. Mile marker 81. 82. My heart was pounding now, my breath coming faster. Almost there, almost past it, just a few more minutes. And then I saw the truck. It was ahead of me, maybe a quarter mile, its running lights visible against the darkness. An 18-wheeler looked like a dry van moving at a good clip. I felt a wave of relief wash over me. I wasn't alone. There was another driver out here, another person sharing this stretch of road with me. I sped up slightly, closing the distance between us. I wanted to be close to another vehicle, wanted the comfort of knowing someone else was nearby. The truck maintained its speed, steady and constant, its lights cutting through the darkness. I was maybe 100 yards behind when I noticed something odd. The truck wasn't leaving any tire spray. The road was damp from earlier rain, and my tires were kicking up a fine mist of water. But the truck ahead of me, there was nothing. Like it was floating just above the pavement instead of actually touching it. I slowed down, my skin prickling. The truck ahead maintained its speed, and I watched as the distance between us grew. I could see it clearly now in my headlights, see the details of the trailer, the mud flaps, the license plate. The license plate, I couldn't make out the numbers, but I could see the design. It was wrong. The colors were off, the format different from any plate I'd seen before. I'd been driving for over 2 decades, hauled loads through every state in the continental U.S., and I'd never seen a plate like that. I reached for my CB mic. Breaker 19, this is Rourke southbound on 191. There a truck ahead of me. Anybody know who's running this route tonight? Static. I tried again. Looking for the driver in the dry van ahead of me on 191. You got your ears on? Nothing. The truck ahead was pulling away now, its lights getting dimmer. I pressed the accelerator trying to keep up, but it was like the truck was accelerating without me hearing the engine. Within 30 seconds, it had disappeared around a curve, its taillights vanishing into the darkness. I came around the same curve maybe 10 seconds later, my headlights sweeping across the empty highway. The truck was gone. Just gone. The road stretched out straight and flat for miles ahead, and there was no sign of any vehicle. I hit the brakes, my truck shuddering as it slowed. I pulled over onto the shoulder and stopped, my hands gripping the wheel so tight my knuckles had gone white. I sat there, breathing hard, staring at the empty road ahead. There was nowhere for that truck to go. No exits, no turnoffs, nothing. It had just vanished, like it had driven straight through a door in reality and disappeared on the other side. I looked at the mile marker. 83. I forced myself to breathe slowly, to think rationally. Maybe I'd been mistaken. Maybe the truck had been farther ahead than I'd thought, had already turned off before I'd come around the curve. Maybe my depth perception was off, my tired mind playing tricks on me. But I knew I was lying to myself. I'd seen that truck, I'd watched it disappear, and just like the woman, just like the headlights I'd seen weeks ago, it had vanished in a way that defied explanation. I was reaching for the gear shift, ready to get back on the road, when I heard it. A voice on the CB, faint, distorted, barely audible beneath the static. At first I thought it was just interference, just the random noise that sometimes comes through the radio in remote areas. But as I listened, I realized it was words. Someone was talking. I turned up the volume and listened carefully. The voice was male, older, and it sounded stressed. Panicked, almost. Anyone reading me? Need help? Broke down? I grabbed the mic. This is Rourke on Channel 19. I copy you. What's your location? The voice came back, clearer now. Thank God. I'm on 191, just past mile marker 83. My truck died and I can't get it started. I need a tow. I looked around. There were no trucks on the shoulder, no vehicles at all. The highway was completely empty. I'm at mile marker 83 right now, I said slowly. I don't see you. There was a pause, and then the show voice came back, sounding confused. What? I can see your lights. You're right there. Maybe 100 yards north of my position. My blood ran cold. I was facing north. There was nothing ahead of me but empty highway. I'm looking north right now. There's no truck. There's nothing. Another pause. Longer this time. When the voice came back, it sounded different. Frightened. What year is it? The question, caught me completely off guard. What? What year is it? The voice repeated, more insistent now. Tell me what year it is. I didn't want to answer. Every instinct I had was telling me to put the mic down, to start the truck and drive away as fast as I could. But something made me respond. It's 2024. Silence. Just static. And then, so faint I almost didn't hear it, the voice came through one last time. It's 2003 here, God help me. It's still 2003. The CB went dead. Not just quiet, but completely dead. The display went dark, the channel indicator disappeared, and when I tried the power button, nothing happened. It was like the radio had been unplugged, even though I could see it was still connected. I sat there in the darkness, my mind reeling. 2003. 21 years ago. The voice had said it was 2003 where he was. Like he was trapped somewhere, somehow, still living in a moment 2 decades in the past. I thought about the truck I'd seen, the one with the strange license plate. I thought about the woman standing on the side of the road in her old-fashioned coat. I thought about all the reports I'd read, all the sightings that had happened over the years in this exact location. And I realized something that made my stomach turn. They were all still here, all of them. The woman from 1892, the driver from 2003, the truck I'd just seen, everyone who had ever vanished or died or disappeared on this stretch of highway. They were all still here, trapped in some kind of loop, some fold in time or space that kept them locked in the moment of their death or disappearance. And I was driving through it. I started the truck with shaking hands and pulled back onto the highway. I pushed the accelerator to the floor, pushing the truck to 70, then 80, faster than I should have been going, but I didn't care. I needed to get away from this place, needed to put as much distance between me and mile marker 83 as I possibly could. The highway stretched out ahead of me, empty and dark. I kept my eyes locked forward, refusing to look at the mirrors, refusing to acknowledge anything that might be in my peripheral vision. I just drove, my heart pounding, my breath coming in short gasps. I was maybe 10 miles past the marker when I saw her again. She was standing in the middle of my lane, exactly like before. Head down, hair covering her face, arms at her sides. But this time she was different. This time, I could see through her. She was translucent, almost transparent, like an image projected onto the air. I could see the highway through her body, see the painted lines and the asphalt beneath her feet. But she was there, real enough to make me slam on the brakes, real enough to make my heart stop. I was maybe 20 feet away when I stopped. I sat there staring at her, and for the first time I understood what I was looking at. Not a person. Not anymore. Whatever she had been, whatever had happened to her on this road all those years ago, what was left was just an echo, a recording playing over and over, trapped in an endless loop. And she wasn't alone. As I sat there, other figures began to appear, faint and ghostly, barely visible. But there, a man standing on the shoulder, his arm raised like he was trying to flag someone down. A car, old and boxy, its headlights dim and flickering, driving slowly along the opposite lane. A woman and child, holding hands, standing in the breakdown lane with their backs to the road. They were all transparent, all trapped in their own moments, playing out scenes that had happened years or decades or centuries ago. The highway was full of them, layer upon layer of tragedy and loss and death, all compressed into this one stretch of road. I understood now why the camera hadn't seen the woman, why the CB had picked up a voice from 2003. This place wasn't just a road. It was a scar, a wound in the fabric of reality where time and space had been damaged somehow, where the past and present existed simultaneously, bleeding through into each other. The woman in the road tilted her head slightly. It was the first time I'd seen her move beyond walking, and the gesture was so unexpected that I gasped. Slowly, impossibly slowly, she began to raise her head. I didn't want to see her face. I didn't want to know what was hidden beneath that curtain of dark hair. Every cell in my body was screaming at me to look away, to close my eyes, to do anything except watch as she lifted her head and turned her gaze toward me. But I couldn't move. I sat there, frozen, as she raised her head inch by inch. I could see her chin now, pale and too smooth. Then her mouth, slightly open. Then her nose. I hit the gas before she could raise her head any further. The truck lurched forward and I drove straight through where she was standing. I felt nothing. No impact. No resistance. She simply vanished as I passed through her, dissipating like smoke. I didn't slow down. I kept driving, my foot pressed to the floor until I was across the Wyoming border and into Montana. Only then did I pull over. Only then did I let myself breathe. My hands were shaking so badly I could barely hold my phone. I pulled up the footage from the dash cam, rewound it to the moment when I'd seen her standing in the road. I watched it 3 times, and each time the result was the same. The camera showed nothing, just empty highway. Just me hitting the brakes for no apparent reason, sitting there for a moment, then driving forward again. No woman, no other figures, nothing. I made my delivery in Bozeman, dropped the load, signed the paperwork. I told dispatch I needed a few days off, personal time. They didn't ask questions. Maybe they could hear something in my voice. Maybe they just didn't care. I drove home, back to my apartment in Idaho Falls, and I sat there for 3 days trying to process what had happened. Trying to make sense of it, trying to convince myself that I hadn't seen what I knew I'd seen. On the 4th day, I went back to my research. I looked up everything I could find about mile marker 83 on US 191. And I found something I'd missed before. In 1892, the year the stagecoach had crashed, that exact location had been an important waypoint. A place where travelers would rest, where the road split between 2 different routes. Hundreds, maybe thousands of people had passed through that spot over the years, and a significant number of them had never made it to their destination. Disappearances. Accidents, unexplained deaths. The numbers were higher than they should have been, higher than random chance could account for. That spot, that specific location, had been claiming lives for over 130 years. I thought about what the voice on the CB had said. It's still 2003. Still, like time had stopped for him, like he was trapped in that moment, unable to move forward or back. Was that what happened to everyone who disappeared on that road? Were they all still there, caught in some kind of temporal loop, reliving their final moments over and over? And if so, how many of them were there? How many ghosts? How many echoes? How many trapped souls were walking that stretch of highway? Invisible to cameras, but visible to those of us who happened to be in the right place at the right time? I started having dreams after that. Always the same dream. I'm driving on US 191, approaching mile marker 83, and every time, she's there, standing in the middle of the road. But in the dream, I can't stop. The brakes don't work, and I drive straight toward her, getting closer and closer until I can see her face. And her face is my face. I wake up before impact, always. My heart pounding, my sheets soaked with sweat, and I lie there in the dark, wondering if the dream is a warning, wondering if one day I'll be driving that road and I won't be able to stop, if I'll become just another echo, another ghost trapped in that endless loop. I haven't been back to US 191 at night. I won't. I don't care what dispatch offers me, how much they pay, how urgent the load is, I'm not going back. Because I've seen what's waiting there. Seen the faces of the lost and the disappeared. And I know that if I go back, if I tempt fate one more time, I might not make it out. There are some roads you don't come back from. Some places where the line between the living and the dead is so thin, it might as well not exist at all. US 191, mile marker 83, that's one of those places. And the woman with her head down and her face hidden, she's still there, still standing in the darkness, waiting, watching the highway with eyes I pray I'll never see. Because I have a feeling that if I ever do see her face, if she ever fully raises her head and looks at me, that'll be it. That'll be the moment I cross over from observer to participant, from driver to ghost. So I stay away. I take the long routes, the detours, the roads that add hours to my trips. And when other drivers ask me why, I just tell them I prefer the scenery. Because the truth, the real truth, is something I can barely admit to myself. That there are things out there in the dark that we're not meant to understand. Things that exist in the spaces between moments, in the gaps between what is and what was. Things that wait in the same spot for decades or centuries, patient and eternal, watching us drive past with hunger or longing or something else I don't have words for. And the most terrifying part, I think she knows my face now. I think she's seen me, recognized me, marked me somehow. Because sometimes, late at night when I'm driving other roads in other states, I'll catch a glimpse of something in my mirrors. A figure standing on the shoulder. A shape in the darkness that shouldn't be there. And for just a moment, just a split second before it vanishes, I could swear it's her. Following me, waiting for me to make a mistake, to let my guard down, to drive through Wyoming at night just one more time. I won't, I can't, because I know what's waiting there. I held out for 2 months. 2 months of taking alternate routes, of turning down high-paying loads, of watching my bank account dwindle while I stuck to my daytime runs and avoided Wyoming altogether. My dispatcher started asking questions. Other drivers started noticing. Word gets around in this business, and when a veteran hauler suddenly starts refusing profitable routes for no apparent reason, people talk. I told them I was dealing with some personal issues, that I needed to stick closer to home for a while. Most of them accepted that, but I could see the skepticism in their eyes. They knew something was off, knew there was more to the story than I was telling them. Then came the night I couldn't say no. It was late November, a few days before Thanksgiving. I got a call from my ex-wife, Sarah. Our daughter, Emma, was in the hospital in Billings, emergency appendectomy. She was going to be fine, Sarah said, but she was asking for me. Wanted me there when she woke up from surgery. The fastest route from Idaho Falls to Billings runs straight through Wyoming. Straight through US 191, straight past mile marker 83. I could have gone around. Could have taken I-84 east to I-25 north, added 3 hours to the trip. But Emma was scared and she wanted her dad, and I wasn't going to let some ghost story keep me from being there for my daughter. I left at 7 p.m., the truck empty for once, just me and the road. I told myself it would be different this time. I had a reason to be there, a purpose beyond just hauling freight. Maybe that would protect me somehow. Maybe whatever was out there only targeted people who were alone and aimless, people with nowhere to be and no one waiting for them. I knew I was grasping at straws, but I needed something to hold on to. The drive started out normal enough. Traffic was light, the weather clear. I made good time through Idaho and into Wyoming, hitting Rock Springs just after 10 p.m. I stopped for fuel and coffee, stretching my legs and trying to calm my nerves. As I stood at the pump watching the numbers tick up on the display, an old truck pulled in next to me. The driver climbed out, a weathered man in his 60s with a gray beard and tired eyes. He nodded at me and I nodded back. "Long night ahead?" he asked. "Heading to Billings," I said. "Family emergency." He studied me for a moment, his expression unreadable. "You'll be taking 191 north then." It wasn't a question. I nodded. "Be careful on that stretch," he said quietly. "Between mile markers 80 and 90, especially after midnight." My skin prickled. "Why do you say that?" He looked away, his gaze distant. "I've been driving these roads for 40 years. Seen things I can't explain. That stretch of highway, there's something wrong with it. Has been for as long as I can remember." He looked back at me, his eyes sharp. "You feel it when you drive through there. Like you're being watched, like you're passing through somewhere you're not supposed to be." "You ever see anything specific?" I asked, keeping my voice casual. He was quiet for a moment, then nodded slowly. "Once. Maybe 20 years ago. Woman standing on the side of the road in the middle of the night. I stopped to help her, but when I got out of my truck, she was gone. Just vanished. I thought maybe I'd been seeing things, but..." He trailed off, shaking his head. "I know what I saw." "What do you think it was?" I asked. He shrugged. "Don't know. Don't want to know. And just avoid that road at night now. Take the long way around. Figure an extra hour of driving is worth the peace of mind." He finished fueling up and climbed back into his truck. Before he drove away, he rolled down his window and looked at me one last time. "Whatever you do, don't stop between those markers, not for anything. You see someone on the side of the road, someone flagging you down, you keep driving. You hear me?" I nodded, my throat tight. "I hear you." He drove off, and I stood there in the fluorescent glow of the gas station lights, wondering if I should take his advice. If I should take the long way around, add the extra time to my trip, play it safe. But Emma was waiting, and I'd already wasted enough time being afraid. I got back in the truck and headed north. I hit US 191 just before midnight. The highway was empty, the darkness absolute. No moon tonight, just stars scattered across the sky like ice crystals. The temperature had dropped to the low teens and frost was forming on my windshield despite the defroster running full blast. I kept my speed steady at 60, my eyes locked on the road. The mile markers ticked by slowly. 75, 78, 80. My hands tightened on the wheel. I could feel my heart rate picking up, my breathing getting shallow. I forced myself to stay calm, to keep my attention on the road ahead. Mile marker 81 appeared in my headlights and vanished behind me. Then 82. The CB crackled to life, making me jump. I'd left it on, but turned down low, not really expecting to hear anything out here. But now someone was talking, their voice faint beneath the static. "Anyone out there? Can anyone hear me?" I recognized that voice. It was the same one I'd heard weeks ago. The driver who'd said it was still 2003. My hand moved toward the CB, hovering over the mic, but I didn't pick it up. I just listened. "I've been here for so long," the voice continued, sounding exhausted. "Hopeless. I can't get out. Every time I think I've made it past, I end up right back here. Mile marker 83, always 83. I could see the marker ahead now, appearing in my headlights. 83. I held my breath as I approached it. "If anyone can hear me," the voice said, "tell my family I'm sorry. Tell them I tried to get home. Tell them..." The voice cut off abruptly, replaced by silence. Not static, just silence, like the radio had been muted. And that's when I saw the truck. It was parked on the shoulder ahead, hazard lights flashing. The same dry van I'd seen before, with the strange license plate. As I got closer, I could see someone standing next to it. A man, middle-aged, wearing a trucker's jacket. He was waving his arms, trying to flag me down. I thought about what the old driver at the gas station had said. Don't stop, not for anything. But this was different. This was a person who needed help. A fellow driver stranded on the side of the road. I couldn't just leave him there. I started to slow down, my foot easing off the gas. The man kept waving, more frantically now. I could see his face in my headlights, could see the desperation in his expression. And then I saw the date on his truck's inspection sticker. I slammed my foot back on the gas, my truck surging forward. The man's expression changed, his face contorting into something that wasn't quite human anymore. His mouth opened too wide, his eyes went black, and he lunged toward my truck as I passed. I didn't look back. I kept my eyes forward, my speed climbing to 70, then 80. In my mirror, I could see the truck and the figure growing smaller, but they weren't disappearing. They were following me, maintaining the same distance no matter how fast I went. The CB erupted with noise, erupted with voices, dozens of them, all talking at once, screaming, begging, calling for help. Some of them sounded recent, modern. Others were older, their language formal and archaic. And beneath it all, a low humming sound that made my teeth ache. I reached over and turned the CB off, but the voices didn't stop. They were coming from everywhere now, filling the cab, echoing in my skull. I could hear them clearly, could make out individual words and phrases. Help me. I can't find the way out. It's been so long. Please, someone, anyone. And beneath them all, one voice. Quieter than the others, but somehow louder. A woman's voice. Caleb. She knew my name. Caleb, stop the truck. My foot moved toward the brake before I could stop myself. I jerked it back, my heart hammering. How did she know my name? How could she know? Caleb, please. I need help. I've been waiting so long. I looked in the mirror and saw her. She was standing in the bed of my truck, her figure translucent but clearly visible. Her head was still down, her hair still covering her face. But her hand was reaching toward the cab, her pale fingers stretching toward the window. Look at me, Caleb. I just want you to look at me. I fixed my eyes on the road ahead, refusing to turn around, refusing to acknowledge what I was seeing in the mirror. The voices were getting louder now, more insistent, overlapping until they became a wall of sound that drowned out everything else. And then, cutting through the noise like a knife, I heard a different voice. Young. Familiar. Dad? Emma. I looked in the mirror without thinking, my head turning automatically at the sound of my daughter's voice. And there she was, standing next to the woman in white. Emma, my little girl, looking scared and confused. Dad, why did you leave me? Why didn't you come? My heart stopped. Emma was in Billings, in the hospital. This wasn't real. It couldn't be real. But she looked so real, so solid. And the fear in her voice, the hurt, it cut through me like glass. Emma, I whispered. The woman in white slowly raised her head. I tore my eyes away before I could see her face, slamming them shut and gripping the wheel so tight I thought it might break. The truck swerved, and I felt the tires hit the shoulder before I pulled it back onto the road. Look at me! The voice wasn't Emma's anymore. It was something else. Something old and angry and vast. It filled the cab, made the windows rattle, made the air itself vibrate with rage. I kept my eyes shut, steering by feel and memory. I could sense things moving around me, could feel the temperature in the cab dropping to freezing. My breath came out in clouds, and frost was forming on the inside of the windshield. You can't escape us, the voice hissed. "We're part of this road now, forever, and you're about to join us." I felt something cold touch the back of my neck. Fingers, icy and wrong, trailing across my skin. I wanted to scream, wanted to open my eyes and see what was happening, but I knew that's what it wanted. That's what they all wanted. For me to look, for me to see. So I kept my eyes shut and I prayed. I'm not a religious man, hadn't been to church since I was a kid, but I prayed anyway. Prayed to God, to the universe, to anyone or anything that might be listening. Prayed for protection, for strength, for the chance to see my daughter again. And then I heard it. A different voice cutting through the chaos. The old trucker from the gas station. "Open your eyes, son. You're past it." I opened my eyes. The voices were gone. The cold was gone. My mirrors showed an empty truck bed, just cargo straps and shadows. The road ahead was clear, and in the distance I could see lights. A town, Pinedale. I looked at the mile marker as it appeared in my headlights. 92. I'd made it through. I pulled into the first parking lot I saw and stopped, my whole body shaking. I sat there for a long time, just breathing, just being grateful to be alive and sane and on the right side of reality. Finally, I pulled out my phone and called Sarah. She answered on the second ring. "Where are you?" she asked. "Emma's asking for you." "I'm in Pinedale," I said, my voice hoarse. "I'll be there in 2 hours." "Is everything okay? You sound—" "I'm fine," I lied. "Just tired. I'll see you soon." I hung up and sat there in the parking lot, watching normal people live their normal lives. Going into the convenience store, filling up their tanks, completely unaware of what existed just a few miles down the road. I made it to Billings by 3 a.m. Emma was awake, groggy from the medication but smiling when she saw me. I held her hand and told her I loved her, and I didn't let go until the nurses made me leave so she could rest. That was 3 weeks ago. Emma's home now, recovered and back to her normal teenage life. I've been staying with Sarah, helping out, taking time off from driving. Dispatch keeps calling with loads, but I keep saying no. Because I can't drive anymore. Not at night, not alone. Every time I get behind the wheel after dark, I see her in my mirrors, standing in the distance, watching, waiting. The woman in white, still on that road, still trapped, still angry. And the worst part? I know she's not done with me. I know that one day, maybe soon, maybe years from now, I'll find myself on that road again. Maybe I'll have no choice. Maybe I'll forget to be careful. Maybe I'll just make a wrong turn in the dark. And when that happens, when I see mile marker 83 appear in my headlights, I know she'll be there, standing in the road, head down, waiting for me to stop, waiting for me to look. Because she knows my name now. She knows my face. And once they know you, once they've marked you, they never really let you go. So I'm writing this down, putting it out there for anyone who might drive that road, anyone who might see something they can't explain. If you're ever on US 191 in Wyoming, between mile markers 80 and 90, especially after midnight, just keep driving. Don't stop, don't look, don't acknowledge anything you see or hear, because that stretch of highway isn't just a road anymore. It's a trap, a prison, a place where time and space have broken down, where the past and present exist together in a nightmare loop that never ends. And if you're not careful, if you let your guard down for even a second, you'll become part of it. Just another voice on the CB calling out for help that will never come. Just another figure standing on the shoulder, waiting for someone to stop. Just another ghost, trapped forever on the road. I see her sometimes in my dreams. standing there in the darkness, head down, patient and eternal. And every time she's a little closer to raising her head, a little closer to showing me what's hidden beneath that curtain of dark hair. I wake up before she can, but I know it's only a matter of time. One night, I won't wake up fast enough. One night, I'll see her face. And when that happens, when I finally see what's been watching me all this time, I have a feeling I won't wake up at all. I'll just be there, on that road, at that mile marker, forever. So if you're reading this, if you're a driver or just someone passing through Wyoming, remember what I've told you. That stretch of highway claims people. It has for over a century, and it's not going to stop. Don't let it claim you too. And if you happen to drive past mile marker 83 late one night, and you see a figure standing on the shoulder, and that figure looks familiar somehow, like someone you might know, just keep driving. Because it might be me, and if it is, I'm already lost. I've been hauling freight for 11 years now, and I've learned that there's a rhythm to this life that most people don't understand. It's not just about driving from point A to point B. It's about knowing when to push and when to rest, when to trust your instincts and when to ignore them. It's about reading the road, reading the weather, reading the small signs that tell you whether a rest stop is safe or whether you should keep driving until you find something better. That rhythm saved my life more times than I can count. But that night in Idaho, that night broke the rhythm entirely. My name is Miguel Hart. I'm 33 years old, been driving professionally since I was 22. I started out doing local deliveries in California, worked my way up to regional routes, and finally got my CDL for cross-country hauls about 6 years ago. I run mostly dry goods, sometimes refrigerated, whatever dispatch throws my way. It's honest work, and it pays the bills. The night everything went wrong started out routine. I'd picked up a load of construction materials in Boise, heading east toward Pocatello. It was mid-October, one of those clear autumn nights where the air is crisp and the stars are so bright they almost hurt to look at. The forecast had been clean, no weather concerns, just a straight shot across I-84. I left Boise around 9 p.m., planning to make it to Pocatello by 2 or 3 in the morning. I'd done this run dozens of times before. Knew every mile marker, every exit, every decent place to stop if I needed a break. It was familiar territory, comfortable. Around 11:30, I started feeling the fatigue hit. Not the dangerous kind, not yet, but that early warning sign that tells you you've been on the road too long without a break. My eyes were getting dry, my back was starting to ache, and I'd already gone through 2 energy drinks trying to stay alert. I knew there was a rest area coming up, maybe 10 miles ahead. It was a small one, nothing fancy, just a parking lot and a restroom building with some vending machines. But it would be perfect for a 20-minute power nap. Maybe a quick walk to stretch my legs. The highway was mostly empty. I'd seen maybe 5 or 6 vehicles in the past hour. All of them passenger cars moving fast. No other trucks, which was unusual for this time of night. Normally you'd see other haulers, especially on a major route like this. But tonight, I had the road to myself. The rest area sign appeared in my headlights. 2 miles. I moved into the right lane and started slowing down, already planning my stop. Pull in, find a good spot under the lights, lock the doors, set my phone alarm for 20 minutes. Simple. The exit ramp curved away from the highway, leading into darkness. The rest area sat about a quarter mile off the interstate, tucked into a little valley between 2 hills. As I came around the curve, I could see the lights of the parking lot ahead, those tall sodium lamps that cast everything in a sickly yellow glow. That's when I noticed something was off. The parking lot was empty. Completely empty. No cars, no trucks, nothing. Just vacant spaces stretching out under the lights like a grid. I slowed down even more, my eyes scanning the lot. It wasn't unusual for a rest area to be empty, especially this late at night, especially at a smaller facility. But something about it felt wrong. The lights were all on, bright and steady, but there was no one there. No vehicles at all. I almost kept driving. Almost pulled back onto the highway and headed for the next rest stop, 30 miles down the road. But I was tired and my eyes were burning, and 20 minutes of rest wasn't going to kill me. I pulled into the lot and circled it once, my headlights sweeping across empty spaces. The restroom building sat in the center, a squat concrete structure with metal doors and narrow windows near the roof. The vending machines were visible through the windows, their displays lit up and inviting. Everything looked normal. Everything looked fine. I picked a spot close to the building under one of the brightest lights and backed into it. Old habit, always park nose out in case you need to leave in a hurry. I set the parking brake, killed the engine, and sat there for a moment, just listening. The silence was absolute, no highway noise, which was strange since we were only a quarter mile from I-84. No wind, no animals, nothing, just dead silence. I told myself I was being paranoid. I'd been on the road too long, my mind was playing tricks on me. I grabbed my phone, checked the time. 11:42 p.m. I set an alarm for midnight and leaned back in my seat, closing my eyes. Sleep didn't come. I kept my eyes closed, tried to relax, but something was nagging at me. Some instinct was telling me that something about this place was wrong. After 5 minutes of trying and failing to rest, I gave up. I sat up and looked around the parking lot again. Still empty, still silent. The lights hummed quietly overhead, and I could see moths fluttering around them, drawn to the glow. That's when I noticed the restroom building. The door was slightly ajar. Not wide open, just a crack, maybe an inch or two. Like someone had gone inside and hadn't pulled it quite closed behind them. I stared at that door for a long time, trying to remember if it had been open when I'd pulled in. I didn't think so, but I couldn't be sure. Maybe the wind had pushed it open. Maybe it didn't latch properly. I climbed out of the cab, my boots hitting the pavement with a sound that seemed too loud in the silence. The air was cold, maybe low 40s, and I could see my breath. I locked the truck out of habit and walked toward the restroom building. The door was definitely open. I could see darkness inside, just a sliver of shadow where the door had swung inward. I pushed it open wider and stepped inside, my hand reaching for the light switch. The fluorescence flickered to life, harsh and bright. The restroom was standard issue. White tile walls, 3 stalls, a row of sinks with those automatic faucets that never work right. Everything looked clean. Too clean, actually, like it had just been scrubbed. I used the restroom, washed my hands, and headed back outside. That's when I heard it. A voice. It was faint, barely audible, coming from somewhere nearby. I stopped and listened, trying to locate the source. It sounded like someone talking on a radio, the words too distorted to make out clearly. I walked around the side of the building, following the sound. There was nothing there, just empty parking spaces and the dark hillside beyond. But the voice continued, rising and falling, almost like someone was having a conversation. And then it stopped, just cut off mid-word, leaving only silence. I stood there for a moment, my heart beating a little faster than it should have been. Then I shook my head and walked back to my truck. Probably just a CB radio in someone's car, parked somewhere I couldn't see. Or maybe it was carrying from the highway, sound traveling weird in the still air. I climbed back into the cab and locked the doors. I sat there, telling myself to start the engine and leave, to get back on the highway and find another place to rest. But I was tired, and I'd already stopped, and it seemed stupid to leave just because I'd heard a voice. I closed my eyes again and tried to relax. The silence pressed in around me, heavy and complete. I focused on my breathing, in and out, trying to let the fatigue pull me under. I was just starting to drift off when I heard it again. A door slamming. The sound was sharp and sudden, echoing across the empty lot. I jerked awake, my eyes snapping open, my hand reaching for the door lock to make sure it was secure. The restroom building was dark now. The lights had gone off. I hadn't touched the switches. I'd left them on when I walked out. I was sure of it. But now the building was completely dark, just a black shape against the yellow glow of the parking lot lights. And standing next to the building, barely visible in the shadows, was a figure. I leaned forward, squinting, trying to make out details. It looked like a person, but I couldn't be sure. The way they were standing was wrong somehow. Too still, too straight, like a mannequin. I watched for maybe 30 seconds, waiting for the figure to move. It didn't, just stood there, motionless. I reached for my CB radio and keyed the mic. Breaker 19. This is Hart at the rest area off mile marker 96 on eastbound 84. Anyone in the area? Static, just static. I tried again. Anyone copy? I'm at the rest area, and I think there's someone here who might need help. More static. And then, faint beneath the noise, I heard it. That voice again. The same one I'd heard earlier. But now I could make out some of the words. Can't find. Help. So cold. My skin prickled. I stared at the CB, then back at the figure near the building. It still hadn't moved. Hello? I said into the mic. If you can hear me, I'm here at the rest area. Do you need assistance? The voice came back clearer now. So cold. Can't see. Help me. I grabbed my flashlight from the door pocket and climbed out of the truck. I kept the engine running this time, kept my keys in my pocket. The figure was still there, standing in the same spot, and I walked toward it slowly, my flashlight beam cutting through the darkness. Hey, I called out. You okay? You need help? No response. I got closer, maybe 20 feet away, and that's when I realized what I was looking at. It wasn't a person, it was a shadow. A person-shaped shadow, standing against the wall of the building, but there was nothing casting it. No person, no object, nothing. Just the shadow itself, dark and solid and impossible. I stopped walking. The shadow didn't move. I shined my flashlight directly at it, and the beam passed right through, illuminating the concrete wall behind it. But the shadow remained clear and distinct. I backed away slowly, my eyes locked on the shadow, my heart hammering in my chest. When I was maybe 30 feet away, the shadow moved. It didn't walk or turn. It just shifted position, like it had been cut out and pasted somewhere else. One moment it was against the wall. The next, it was standing in the parking lot, closer to me. I turned and ran back to my truck. I didn't look back, didn't try to understand what I'd just seen. I just ran, my boots pounding on the pavement, my breath coming in gasps. I reached the truck and yanked the door open, throwing myself inside and slamming it shut. My hands were shaking as I put the truck in gear and hit the gas, not bothering to let the engine warm up, not caring about proper procedure. The truck lurched forward, and I swung it around toward the exit. As I passed the restroom building, I glanced in my mirror and saw the shadow. It was standing in the middle of the parking lot now, perfectly still, watching me leave. I hit the exit ramp doing 40, way too fast, the trailer swaying behind me. I didn't slow down until I was back on I-84, merging into the eastbound lane with my flashers on and my foot pressed to the floor. I drove for 10 miles before I dared to look in my mirrors again. The highway behind me was empty, just darkness, and the faint glow of my taillights reflecting off the asphalt. I pulled over at the next rest area I found, a bigger one with other trucks parked in the lot and people moving around under the lights. I sat there with the engine idling, trying to calm down, trying to make sense of what I'd just seen. A shadow, a person-shaped shadow with nothing casting it. That's what I'd seen. That's what had been standing there in that empty parking lot. I thought about calling someone. Dispatch, the highway patrol, someone. But what would I tell them? That I'd seen a shadow that moved on its own? They'd think I was crazy. Hell, I was starting to think I was crazy. I pulled out my phone and did something I almost never do. I searched online for information about that rest area. I typed in I-84 mile marker 96 rest area, Idaho, and waited for the results to load. The first few hits were just standard information. Rest area, locations, amenities, user reviews. Nothing unusual. But then I found something that made my blood run cold. It was a forum post from 3 years ago, on a trucking message board I'd never heard of. The subject line read, "Weird experience at Idaho rest stop." I clicked on it and started reading. The post was from a driver named Garrett, and he described an experience almost identical to mine. He'd stopped at the rest area late at night, found it empty, and heard voices on his CB that didn't make sense. He'd seen a figure near the restroom building that didn't move right, and he'd left in a hurry. But the detail that really got me was what he'd written at the end of his post. He'd done some research and found out that 20 years ago, a truck driver had died at that rest area. The man had pulled in during a snowstorm, apparently planning to wait it out. But the temperature had dropped to below zero, and his heater had failed. They'd found him frozen to death in his cab the next morning. The driver's name was David Kowalski, and according to the coroner's report, he'd made multiple CB radio calls for help before he died. Calls that no one had answered. I sat there staring at my phone screen, reading and rereading that post. 20 years ago. A driver dying alone, calling for help that never came. So cold. Can't see. Help me. The words I'd heard on the CB. The same words this Garrett guy had heard. The same words that David Kowalski had probably said into his radio as the cold closed in around him. I looked up at the rest area I was currently parked at. It was busy, normal, safe. Other drivers were walking to and from their trucks, lights were on in the vending area, everything was exactly as it should be. But I couldn't shake the image of that empty parking lot, those lights glowing in the darkness, that shadow standing there watching me. I put my phone away and made a decision. I was going to finish this run, drop my load in Pocatello, and then I was going to do some more research. I needed to know if what I'd experienced was real, if other drivers had seen the same things, if that rest area was somehow haunted by the ghost of a man who'd died calling for help. Because if it was real, if there really was something there, then I needed to know. I needed to understand. And if it wasn't real, if I just imagined the whole thing, well, that was a different kind of problem entirely. I pulled back onto the highway and continued east. The drive to Pocatello was uneventful, just me and the road and my thoughts. I made my delivery at 6 a.m., dropped the trailer, and found a motel where I could crash for a few hours. But I didn't sleep. I couldn't. I kept seeing that shadow, standing there in the parking lot, watching me. Kept hearing that voice on the CB, desperate and cold and afraid. When I finally gave up on sleep, I sat at the little desk in my motel room and started digging. I found more forum posts, more stories, more reports of strange experiences at that rest area. Not all of them were the same. Some people had seen lights that shouldn't be there. Others had heard voices or footsteps. A few had reported feeling watched, like something was paying attention to them. But the common thread was the cold. Everyone who'd had an experience there mentioned the cold. How the temperature would drop suddenly, even on warm nights. How their breath would fog in the air. How their fingers would go numb. I found David Kowalski's obituary. He'd been 41 years old, married, 2 kids. He'd been driving for almost 20 years. A veteran hauler who knew the roads as well as anyone. And he'd died alone in a rest area parking lot, freezing to death while he waited for help that never came. The article said that his CB had been found on, tuned to channel 19, the emergency frequency. They'd never determined why no one had responded to his calls. Maybe the weather had interfered with the signal. Maybe no one had been in range. Or maybe people had heard him and assumed it was just another driver complaining about the cold, not realizing he was dying. I closed my laptop and sat there, thinking about David Kowalski. Thinking about how he must have felt in those final hours. The cold seeping into his bones, his voice getting weaker as he called out for someone, anyone, to help him. And I thought about that shadow, the way it had stood there, watching, the way it had moved without walking, shifting from one spot to another like it was being rewritten into reality. Was that David? Was that what was left of him, trapped in that rest area, still calling for help, still trying to get someone's attention? I didn't know. I couldn't know. But I made another decision right then. I was going to go back. I was going to return to that rest area, in the daylight this time, and I was going to see if I could find anything that would help me understand what had happened. Because I couldn't just leave it alone. I couldn't just drive away and pretend I'd never seen anything. If David Kowalski was still there, if some part of him was still trapped in that place, then maybe I could do something to help. Maybe I could be the person who finally answered his call. It was a stupid idea. I knew it was stupid even as I was planning it, but I couldn't let it go. So I checked out of the motel, got back in my truck and headed west on I-84, back toward that rest area, back toward whatever was waiting there. The drive took about 2 hours. I pulled off the highway just after noon, the sun bright overhead, everything looking normal and ordinary in the daylight. The rest area was no longer empty. There were 3 cars parked in the lot, a family with kids playing near the picnic tables, an elderly couple walking their dog. I parked and climbed out, walking slowly across the lot toward the restroom building. In the daylight, it looked completely normal, just a standard rest area facility, nothing special, nothing unusual. I walked around the side of the building to where I'd seen the shadow. There was nothing there, just concrete and the hillside beyond covered in dry grass and scrub brush. I went inside the restroom. It was clean, recently maintained, the fluorescent lights humming quietly. I checked the stalls, looked in the corners, searched for anything that might explain what I'd seen. Nothing. I stood there for a long time, just thinking. Maybe I had imagined it. Maybe I'd been more tired than I'd realized, my mind playing tricks on me in the darkness. It wouldn't be the first time a driver had seen something that wasn't there. But it had felt real. The shadow, the voice on the CB, the cold. All of it had felt absolutely real. I walked back outside and sat on one of the picnic benches, watching the family with their kids, watching the elderly couple throw a ball for their dog. Normal people, living normal lives, completely unaware that this place might be anything other than what it appeared to be. A car pulled in, a sedan with out-of-state plates. A man got out, middle-aged, looked like he'd been driving for a while. He stretched, yawned, and headed toward the restroom. I watched him go inside, watched the door close behind him, and I waited. 2 minutes later, he came back out, got in his car, and drove away. Nothing happened. No shadows, no voices, nothing. I sat there for another hour, watching people come and go. Everything was normal, everything was fine. Finally, I admitted defeat. Whatever I'd experienced last night, it wasn't going to happen again now. Not in the daylight, not with other people around. I got back in my truck and started to pull out of the lot. But as I was leaving, I glanced in my mirror one last time, and there, standing near the restroom building, barely visible in the bright sunlight, was the shadow. It was faint, almost transparent, but it was there, watching me leave. I hit the brakes, my truck lurching to a stop. I stared at the mirror, my heart pounding. The shadow didn't move, just stood there, a dark outline against the concrete wall. I put the truck in reverse and started backing up, my eyes locked on the mirror. The shadow was getting clearer as I got closer, more defined, more solid. And then, just as I was about to reach it, it vanished. Just blinked out of existence like it had never been there. I sat there, my truck idling in the middle of the parking lot, staring at the empty space where the shadow had been. The family was still playing at the picnic tables. The elderly couple was loading their dog into their car. No one else had seen it. No one else had noticed. I was the only one. I put the truck back in drive and left the rest area, my mind racing. I'd seen it again. In broad daylight with other people around, I'd seen it. Which meant it wasn't just exhaustion or darkness or my imagination. It was real. Whatever was in that rest area, it was real. And it had been watching me. I didn't tell anyone what I'd seen. Not dispatch, not the other drivers I talked to at truck stops, not my family. I kept it to myself, locked it away like a secret I wasn't ready to share. Because talking about it would make it more real, and I wasn't ready to face that yet. But I couldn't stop thinking about it. About David Kowalski, frozen to death in his truck. About the shadow that stood near the restroom building, watching. About the voice on the CB still calling for help 20 years after the fact. Over the next 2 weeks, I did more research. I contacted the Idaho DOT and asked about the history of that rest area. They sent me a polite email with some basic information, nothing I hadn't already found online. I tried to find Kowalski's family, thinking maybe I could talk to them, find out if they'd ever experienced anything strange at that location. But I hit dead ends everywhere I looked. Finally, I did something I'd been avoiding. I reached out to Garrett, the driver who'd posted about his experience on the trucking forum. His post was 3 years old, and I wasn't sure he'd still be active on the site, but I sent him a private message anyway. To my surprise, he responded within a day. "Yeah, I remember that night," he wrote. "I've never been back to that rest area. I avoid it completely now, even during the day. I don't care if it adds time to my route. I'm not going back there." We exchanged a few more messages, comparing our experiences. They were nearly identical: the empty parking lot, the voice on the CB, the figure that didn't move right. He'd done the same research I had, found the same information about David Kowalski. "I think he's still there," Garrett wrote. "I think part of him never left, and I think he's trying to get someone to help him, but he doesn't realize he's already dead." The idea chilled me. A ghost that didn't know it was a ghost, still calling for help, still waiting for someone to respond. "Have you ever thought about going back?" I asked. "About trying to help him?" His response came quick. "No, and you shouldn't either. Whatever's there, it's beyond our understanding. You can't help something like that. You can only stay away from it." But I couldn't stay away. The more I thought about it, the more I felt compelled to go back, to try to understand what was happening, to see if there was anything I could do. Dispatch called me with a new load about a week later. Boise to Twin Falls, straight shot down I-84. The route would take me right past that rest area. I could have refused the load, could have asked for a different route, but I didn't. I took it, and I planned my timing carefully. I wanted to arrive at the rest area just after dark, when the parking lot would be empty, but before it got too late. I left Boise at 7 p.m. on a Friday night. The weather was clear, temperature in the low 50s. I made good time, hitting the rest area exit just before 9 p.m. This time, I was prepared. I had my phone fully charged, a good flashlight, and a digital voice recorder I'd bought specifically for this trip. I wanted documentation. I wanted proof. The parking lot was empty again, just like before. The lights were on, casting that same sickly yellow glow across the pavement. I pulled in and parked in the same spot I'd used last time, backing into the space so I was facing the exit. I sat there for a moment, gathering my courage. Then I grabbed my flashlight and the voice recorder and climbed out. The silence hit me immediately. No highway noise, no wind, nothing. Just that oppressive quiet that felt wrong somehow, like the air itself was holding its breath. I turned on the voice recorder and stated the date, time, and location. Then I walked toward the restroom building, my flashlight beam cutting through the darkness. "David Kowalski," I said out loud, feeling ridiculous but pushing through it anyway. "If you're here, if you can hear me, I want to help. My name is Miguel Hart. I'm a truck driver, like you were. I know what happened to you. I know you died here." Nothing. Just silence and the hum of the parking lot lights. I walked around the building to where I'd seen the shadow. The wall was blank, just concrete and darkness. I shined my flashlight across it, looking for anything unusual. "I'm here to help," I continued. "If you need something, if there's something I can do, just let me know. I'm listening." The temperature dropped suddenly. I felt it immediately, a sharp decrease that made me shiver. My breath started fogging in the air, visible in the flashlight beam, and then I heard it. The voice on my CB, faint but clear, coming from inside my truck. "So cold. Help me. Please." I turned and looked at my truck. Through the window, I could see the CB radio. The display lit up, showing activity on channel 19. But I hadn't left it on. I was sure I'd turned it off before I got out. I walked back to the truck and opened the door. The CB was definitely on, and the voice was coming through clearly now. "Can anyone hear me? I'm at the rest area, mile marker 96. My heater's broken and it's getting really cold. Please, if anyone can hear this, I need help." The voice was different from what I'd heard before. More coherent, more desperate. And there was something about the way he spoke, the rhythm of his words, that sounded oddly formal, like he was from a different era. I picked up the CB mic and keyed it. "David, is that you?" The voice stopped. There was silence for a moment, and then, "Yes. Yes, can you hear me? Can you help me? It's so cold I can't feel my fingers anymore." My hands were shaking. I was talking to a dead man. I was having a conversation with someone who'd been dead for 20 years. "David, listen to me," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "What year is it? What's the date?" "It's December 15th, 2004, he said. "Please, I've been calling for hours. No one's answering. I need help." The year he died. He didn't know. He had no idea he was dead, that 20 years had passed. "David," I said carefully, "I need you to listen to me very carefully. Something has happened. You're not where you think you are." "What? What are you talking about?" "I'm at the rest area off I-84. I pulled in because of the snow, but my heater stopped working and now I can't get warm. Please, just send someone to help me." I closed my eyes, trying to figure out what to say. How do you tell someone they're dead? How do you explain to a ghost that they've been gone for 2 decades? "David, what's the last thing you remember? Before you pulled into this rest area, There was a long pause. When he spoke again, his voice was confused. I was driving, heading to Boise. There was a storm coming in, snow, and I decided to wait it out here. I pulled in, called for a tow because my heater was broken, but no one came. And then what happened? Another pause, longer this time. I don't remember. I was waiting, and I was getting colder, and I kept calling, but no one answered, and then his voice trailed off. I waited, giving him time. I'm still waiting, he said finally, his voice small, frightened. Why is no one coming? Why won't anyone help me? Because you don't need help anymore, David, I said gently. You're not cold anymore. You're not in danger. What are you talking about? I'm freezing. I can't feel my legs. I need help. I need someone to come get me. I opened my eyes and looked out at the empty parking lot. The shadow was there, standing near the restroom building. As I watched, it moved, shifting position, and I realized what I was seeing. It wasn't a shadow. It was David's truck. The outline of an 18-wheeler, barely visible, translucent, parked exactly where he must have been when he died. And inside the cab I could see a faint glow. A figure, hunched over, barely visible. David, I said, my voice cracking slightly, look around you. Tell me what you see. I see snow. It's snowing hard. I can barely see the parking lot lights. Everything's white. But it wasn't snowing. The sky was clear, stars visible overhead. What he was seeing wasn't what was really there. He was trapped in his own moment, his own death, reliving it over and over. David, I need you to do something for me. I need you to step outside your truck. Can you do that? Outside? But it's freezing out there. I'll die. You won't die. I promise you won't die. Just step outside. Please. There was a long silence. I watched the ghostly truck, watched the figure inside, and then, slowly, the driver's side door opened. The figure that emerged wasn't solid. It was made of the same translucent material as the truck, barely visible against the darkness. But I could see enough to make out a shape. A man, middle-aged, wearing a heavy jacket. He stood next to the truck, looking around. I'm outside, his voice came through the CB. But I don't see anyone. Where are you? I stepped out of my truck, my flashlight in hand. I'm here, David, right here. Can you see me? The figure turned toward me. For a moment, we looked at each other across the parking lot, across the gap between the living and the dead. I can see a light, he said. Is that you? Yes, that's me. Walk toward the light, David. He started moving, and I realized he was walking through the snow that only he could see. His movements were slow, labored, like he was pushing through deep drifts, but there was no snow, just empty pavement. It's so cold, he said. I'm so tired. I know, but you're almost there. Just keep walking. He got closer, and I could see more details now. His face, weathered and kind. His eyes, confused and frightened. His hands, pale and shaking. He stopped maybe 10 feet away from me, and I could see him clearly now. See the frost on his jacket, the ice in his beard. Things that shouldn't be there, things that existed only in his reality. Who are you? He asked. My name is Miguel. I'm here to help you. I don't understand. Where is everyone? Where are the police? I've been calling for hours. David, I said as gently as I could, you need to understand something. A lot of time has passed, more time than you realize. What? No, I just pulled in here. It's only been... He trailed off, confusion crossing his face. How long has it been? 20 years, David. It's been 20 years since that night. He stared at me, his expression shifting from confusion to disbelief. to horror. "No, that's not possible. I was just... You died here," I said. "You froze to death waiting for help, and somehow some part of you got stuck here. You've been calling for help every night since then, but you've been calling from the past, from the moment you died." He looked down at his hands, and I saw realization dawn on his face. "I'm dead? I'm sorry." He was quiet for a long time. Then he looked up at me, and I could see tears on his face. "My family, my wife, my kids, they're okay," I said, even though I didn't know for sure. But I felt like it was the right thing to say. "They're okay." He nodded slowly, and I could see him starting to fade. The edges of his form were becoming less distinct, like he was dissolving into the air. "Thank you," he said, his voice barely audible. "Thank you for finally answering." "You're welcome, David. You can rest now. You don't have to wait anymore." He smiled, and it was the saddest thing I'd ever seen. And then he was gone. Just disappeared, like he'd never been there. The ghost truck vanished with him, and I was left standing alone in the empty parking lot. I stood there for a long time, just breathing, just processing what had happened. The voice recorder was still running, had captured everything. But I knew, even as I stood there, that when I played it back, it would just be me talking to myself. The CB wouldn't have recorded David's voice. The camera on my phone wouldn't have captured his image. Because he'd existed in a different space, a different time. A moment, frozen 20 years in the past, replaying over and over until someone finally acknowledged it, finally answered his call for help. I got back in my truck and sat there, my hands on the wheel. The parking lot felt different now. The oppressive silence was gone, replaced by normal night sounds. I could hear traffic from the highway, hear the wind rustling through the dry grass on the hillside. David was gone. Finally, after 20 years, he was at rest. I started the engine and pulled out of the lot, heading back toward the highway. As I merged onto I-84, I thought about what Garrett had said, that I couldn't help something like that, that I should stay away. But he'd been wrong. I had helped. I'd done the thing no one else had been able to do. I'd answered David's call. I'd acknowledged his existence, told him the truth he needed to hear. And maybe that was all he'd needed all along. Just someone to listen. Someone to understand. Someone to finally respond after years of calling into the void. I thought about calling Garrett, telling him what had happened, but I decided against it. Some experiences are too personal, too strange to share with anyone else. This was between me and David, between the living and the dead. I drove through the night, my mind quiet for the first time in weeks. I'd faced something I couldn't explain, something that defied everything I thought I knew about reality. And I'd come out the other side. Or so I thought. It wasn't until 3 nights later, when I was hauling a load through Nevada, that I started to wonder if I'd made a mistake. I was stopped at a rest area, a different one this time, miles away from Idaho. I was in my bunk, trying to sleep when I heard it. A voice on the CB. Faint, distorted, but familiar. "Help me, please." I sat up, my heart racing. No, it couldn't be. David was gone. I'd helped him. He was at rest. I climbed into the front seat and looked at the CB. It was on, showing activity on channel 19, and the voice was getting clearer. "Miguel, can you hear me? It's so cold. I need help." My blood ran cold. It was David's voice, the same voice I'd heard in that parking lot in Idaho. "David," I said into the mic, my voice shaking. "Is that you?" "Yes. Yes, it's me. I'm so cold. Where are you? Why did you leave me?" "I didn't leave you. You were gone. You vanished." "I don't understand." I'm still here. I'm still waiting. Please, you said you'd help me." I stared at the CB, my mind racing. This couldn't be happening. I'd helped him. I'd set him free, unless I hadn't. Unless all I'd done was make contact, make him aware that someone could hear him. And now he was following me, still calling for help, still trapped in his moment of death. "David, listen to me. I'm not at the rest area anymore. I'm hundreds of miles away. But I can hear you. I can hear your voice. You're close. I know you are. Please, just come back. Just help me." I turned off the CB, my hands shaking. But I could still hear his voice, faint but persistent, coming from somewhere outside the truck. I looked out the window, scanning the darkened rest area, and there, standing under one of the lights, was the shadow. The same translucent figure I'd seen in Idaho, watching me. I locked the doors and started the engine. I didn't wait. I just drove, pulling out of the rest area and back onto the highway as fast as I could. But as I drove, I kept checking my mirrors. And every time I looked, I could see him. David, standing on the side of the road, watching me pass. Always in the same position, head down, hands at his sides. Following me. I drove straight through to Denver, not stopping except for fuel and food, and even then only at busy places with lots of people around. Every time I checked my mirrors, I half expected to see him standing there. David, the ghost I'd tried to help. But he was gone, or at least he wasn't visible anymore. The CB stayed silent. The shadows stayed normal. Whatever had happened at that rest area in Nevada, it hadn't followed me beyond that night. Or so I wanted to believe. I delivered my load and took 3 days off, holed up in a cheap motel room trying to figure out what to do. I'd made contact with something I shouldn't have. I'd opened a door I didn't know how to close. On the 4th day, I got a call from my dispatcher. They had a load heading from Denver back to Boise. I almost said no. Almost told them I was done with Idaho routes. Done with anything that would take me near that rest area. But refusing would raise questions I wasn't ready to answer. So I said yes, and I planned my route carefully, making sure I'd hit that stretch of I-84 during daylight hours when the rest area would be full of normal people living normal lives. I left Denver at 4 a.m., pushing hard to make time. The sun was up by the time I hit the Idaho border, bright and warm, burning off the morning fog. I felt better in the daylight, safer. I passed the rest area just after noon. The parking lot was full, families having picnics, RVs pulled in for a break, dogs running around on the grass. Everything looked perfectly normal. I didn't stop. I kept driving, my eyes straight ahead, refusing to look at the restroom building or the spot where David's truck had been parked. But as I passed the exit, I caught a glimpse of something in my mirror. Just for a second, barely visible in the bright sunlight. A figure standing near the building, watching the highway. I told myself it was just another traveler, someone stretching their legs, enjoying the sunshine, nothing more, but I knew better. I made my delivery in Boise and picked up a return load heading back east. This time, I planned to hit that rest area at night. I know it sounds crazy, but I needed to know. I needed to understand what was happening. Whether David was still there, whether I'd helped him, or just made things worse. I timed it perfectly. I pulled into the rest area just after midnight, 3 weeks to the day since I'd first spoken to David. The parking lot was empty again, just like before. The lights cast their familiar yellow glow across the pavement. I sat in my truck for a long time, gathering my courage. Finally, I grabbed my flashlight and voice recorder and climbed out. The silence was absolute, just like before. No highway noise, no wind, nothing. I walked toward the restroom building, my footsteps echoing in the stillness. "David?" I called out. "Are you here?" Nothing, just silence. I walked around the building to where I'd seen him before. The wall was blank, empty. No shadow, no ghost truck, nothing. David, if you can hear me, please respond. I need to know if you're still here. I need to know if I helped you or if you're still trapped. The temperature dropped, but only slightly. Not the dramatic plunge I'd experienced before. Just a gentle cooling, like someone had opened a window. And then I heard it. Not on the CB this time, but directly in the air around me. A whisper, so faint I could barely make it out. Thank you. I spun around, trying to locate the source. David, is that you? Thank you for listening. Thank you for trying. The voice was different now. Calmer. Peaceful. Not desperate or afraid. Are you okay? I asked. Are you at rest? A pause, and then, I'm leaving. I can feel it. I'm finally leaving. Where are you going? I don't know. But it's warm there. It's not cold anymore. Relief flooded through me. I'm glad. I'm sorry I couldn't help you sooner. I'm sorry you had to wait so long. You did help. You heard me. After all these years, someone finally heard me. That's all I needed. The air around me started to warm, the cold dissipating like fog in sunlight. I could feel him fading, moving on to wherever it was that ghosts go when they finally let go. David, wait. Before you go, I need to know. Why did you follow me? Why did I see you at that rest area in Nevada? Another pause, longer this time. When he spoke again, his voice was fainter, like he was speaking from a great distance. I wasn't following you. That wasn't me. That was something else. Something that's been here longer than I have. My blood ran cold. What do you mean? What else is here? This place. It's not just me. There are others, trapped like I was. Some of them don't even remember who they were. They're just echoes, shadows. And some of them are angry. Angry at what? At being forgotten, at being left behind, at dying alone. I thought about the shadow I'd seen in Nevada, the voice on the CB that had sounded like David but somehow wasn't quite right. David, did I make a mistake? Did I wake something up that should have stayed asleep? His voice was barely audible now, fading with every word. No. You did the right thing. You gave me peace. But be careful, Miguel. This rest area isn't the only place like this. There are spots all over these highways where the veil is thin, where the past and present touch. And not all the things trapped there are as harmless as I was. How do I know which places are dangerous? You'll feel it, like you felt it here. That wrongness in the air, that silence that's too heavy. Trust your instincts. And if you ever hear someone calling for help on the CB late at night, someone who sounds lost and afraid, think carefully before you answer. Because sometimes the thing calling isn't looking for help, it's looking for company. David, I have to go now. Thank you, Miguel. Thank you for giving me peace. And then he was gone. Not faded, not disappeared gradually, just gone. One moment I could feel his presence, and the next there was nothing. Just normal night air, and the distant sound of traffic on the highway. I stood there for a long time, processing what he'd said. There were other places like this, other rest areas, other stretches of highway where the dead lingered. And I'd stumbled onto one of them, had made contact with something that existed between worlds. I walked back to my truck, my mind racing. I should have felt relieved. I'd helped David, given him the peace he needed. That was a good thing. But his warning echoed in my head. Not all the things trapped there are as harmless as I was. I climbed into my truck and sat there, staring at the empty parking lot. And that's when I noticed it. The restroom building lights were off, all of them. not just the interior lights. The whole building was dark. But the parking lot lights were still on, still glowing that sickly yellow, still illuminating everything around them. I looked closer at the building and my stomach dropped. The door was open, wide open, and there was something moving inside. I couldn't see what it was, just a shifting darkness, like smoke moving against a wall, but I could feel it watching me, could feel its attention focused on my truck, on me. David's words came back. Some of them are angry. I started the engine, my hands shaking. The darkness inside the building shifted, and for just a moment, I saw it clearly. A figure, but not like David had been. This one was wrong, distorted. Its shape didn't make sense, like it was several people overlapping, existing in the same space, and it was moving toward the door. I hit the gas before it could emerge, my truck lurching forward. I swung around toward the exit, my tires squealing on the pavement. In my mirror, I could see the darkness spilling out of the building, spreading across the parking lot like oil. I hit the exit ramp doing 50, way too fast, the trailer swaying dangerously behind me. I didn't slow down until I was back on the highway, merging into traffic with my heart pounding and my breath coming in gasps. I drove for an hour before I dared to look in my mirrors again. The highway behind me was empty, just normal darkness and the glow of taillights in the distance. But I couldn't shake the image of that thing in the restroom building. That darkness that had seemed to watch me with something that wasn't quite eyes. I pulled into a truck stop in Mountain Home and sat there until sunrise. My doors locked, my windows up, jumping at every sound. When the sun finally came up, I felt brave enough to get out and walk around. Everything looked normal. Other trucks were pulling in and out, drivers heading for coffee and breakfast, the day shift taking over from the night. No shadows, no ghosts, no darkness that moved on its own. I went inside and bought the strongest coffee they had. I sat at the counter and tried to eat, but my appetite was gone. The waitress asked if I was okay, said I looked pale. I told her I was just tired. When I finally got back on the road, I made a decision. I was done with that rest area. Done with trying to understand what was there. Done with investigating the paranormal. I'd helped David, and that was good, but I'd also seen things I didn't want to see again. Garrett had been right. Some places you just stay away from. But David's warning stayed with me. There are spots all over these highways where the veil is thin. How many of them were there? How many rest areas? How many truck stops? How many stretches of lonely highway had claimed lives over the years? How many ghosts were trapped in those places, calling out for help that would never come? I started paying more attention after that. To the feeling I'd get sometimes when I pulled into a rest area late at night. That sense of wrongness, of silence that was too heavy. When I felt it, I'd leave. I didn't care how tired I was, didn't care if it added hours to my trip. I just left, and I started noticing a pattern. Certain places had that feeling more than others. Remote rest areas, old truck stops that had been around for decades, stretches of highway that ran through empty country where cell service was spotty and help was far away. I began documenting them, keeping a notebook with locations and dates and descriptions of what I'd felt or seen. I didn't share it with anyone. It was just for me, a record of the places I needed to avoid. But I couldn't avoid all of them. Sometimes, dispatch would give me a load that took me through one of those spots, and I'd have to make a choice. Drive through at night and risk encountering something, or wait until daylight and be late with my delivery. Usually I chose to wait, but there was one time, about 2 months after David, when I didn't have a choice. It was an urgent medical shipment, time-sensitive cargo that needed to get from Boise to a hospital in Billings. I had a narrow window to make the delivery, and the route took me straight through northwestern Wyoming on US 20, a lonely highway that cut through some of the most remote country in the lower 48. I'd driven that road before, always during the day. But this time, I was going to hit it at midnight. And I already knew how it was going to feel. I tried to talk dispatch into finding another driver, but there was no one else available with the right equipment and the right certifications. It had to be me. So I took the load, and I headed east from Boise with a sense of dread settling in my stomach like a stone. The drive started out fine. Traffic was light, the weather clear. But as I got closer to Wyoming, as the sun went down and darkness settled over the landscape, I could feel it. That familiar wrongness, that heaviness in the air. I crossed the Idaho-Wyoming border just after 11 p.m. The highway stretched out ahead of me, empty and dark, cutting through miles of nothing. No towns, no gas stations, no lights except my own headlights and the stars overhead. I turned on my CB, scanning through the channels, looking for another driver, for any voice to keep me company. But there was nothing. Just static and the occasional burst of noise that might have been a voice or might have been interference. Around 11:45, I passed a historical marker. I almost didn't notice it. Just a brown sign with white lettering, too small to read at highway speed. But something made me slow down, made me look. I couldn't make out the words, but I could see enough to know it was marking something. A battle, maybe. Or an old settlement, or a tragedy. I thought about stopping, about reading what it said. But David's warning echoed in my head. Think carefully before you answer. So I kept driving. 5 minutes later, I saw the lights. They were ahead of me, maybe a mile down the highway. 2 headlights moving slowly, weaving slightly like the driver was having trouble staying in their lane. I flashed my high beams, trying to signal them, trying to get their attention. The lights ahead didn't respond, just kept moving at that same slow, weaving pace. I got closer, and I could see it was a truck, an old one, from the shape of the headlights and the height off the ground, maybe from the 70s or 80s. I tried the CB. Breaker 19, this is hard on US 20 eastbound. There's a truck ahead of me that looks like it might be having trouble. Driver, if you can hear me, you might want to pull over. No response. Just static. I got closer still, maybe 100 yards behind, and that's when I noticed something wrong. The truck wasn't leaving any tire marks on the wet pavement. The road was damp from earlier rain, and my tires were leaving clear tracks. But the truck ahead, there was nothing. Just like before. Just like the truck I'd seen on US 191 in Wyoming. I slowed down, my heart rate picking up. This wasn't David, this was something else. Something that had been on this road longer, that had died here in a different era. The truck ahead started to slow, its brake lights coming on. Red and bright, casting a glow across the wet pavement. Except there was no pavement where the brake lights were shining, just empty air. The truck was starting to fade, becoming transparent, and I could see straight through it to the highway beyond. I hit my brakes, slowing to a crawl. The ghost truck slowed with me, maintaining the same distance. And then, slowly, it started to pull over onto the shoulder. I should have kept driving, should have passed it and never looked back. But I couldn't. I had to know. I pulled over behind it, leaving plenty of distance between us. I put my truck in park and sat there, watching. The ghost truck sat there on the shoulder, its brake lights still on, its engine idling with a sound I could almost hear. And then the driver's door opened. A figure climbed out, tall, wearing what looked like denim and a flannel shirt. He walked around to the front of his truck, and I could see him clearly in my headlights. He was looking at his engine, like he was checking for a problem. His movements were slow, methodical, normal, except he was transparent. I I could see the hillside behind him, see the sagebrush and rocks through his body. He stood there for maybe 30 seconds looking at his engine. And then he turned and looked directly at my truck. Directly at me. I couldn't see his face. It was too dark, too distorted. But I could feel his gaze, could feel him staring at me through the windshield. And then he started walking toward me. I didn't wait. I hit the gas and pulled back onto the highway, my tires squealing as they fought for traction on the wet road. In my mirror, I could see him standing there in the middle of the highway watching me drive away. But he wasn't alone anymore. There were other figures now, emerging from the darkness on either side of the road. Shadows and shapes and things that didn't quite make sense. Some of them looked human, others didn't. They were all watching me, all standing there on that lonely stretch of highway, watching my truck disappear into the distance. I drove for 20 miles before I dared to slow down. My hands were shaking so badly I could barely hold the wheel. My breath was coming in short gasps, and my heart felt like it was going to explode. David had been right. There were other places like that rest area, other spots where the dead lingered, where the past and present touched. And I'd just driven through one of them. I made my delivery in Billings just before dawn, dropped the cargo, and headed straight home. I didn't stop except for fuel, didn't sleep except for a few hours in a truck stop parking lot in broad daylight. When I finally got home to my apartment in Boise, I locked the door and stood in the shower until the hot water ran out. But I couldn't wash away the memory of those figures standing on the highway, watching me. Couldn't shake the feeling that I'd seen something I was never meant to see. And I couldn't stop thinking about what David had said. Some of them are angry. What happens when you encounter one of the angry ones? What happens when you stop for the wrong ghost, when you answer the wrong call for help? I had a feeling I didn't want to know. I took a month off after that night on US 20, told dispatch I needed personal time, that I had family matters to attend to. They didn't ask questions, just marked me as unavailable and moved on. I spent that month trying to process everything that had happened, trying to make sense of the things I'd seen, the voices I'd heard, the shadows that moved on their own. I read everything I could find about hauntings, about ghosts, about places where the veil between worlds was thin. Most of it was nonsense. Ghost hunting websites full of blurry photos and wild speculation. Forums where people claimed to have seen angels or demons or interdimensional beings. But buried in all that noise, I found a few things that rang true. Stories from other drivers who'd had experiences similar to mine. Accounts of rest areas and truck stops that felt wrong, where people saw things that couldn't be explained. One forum post in particular caught my attention. It was from a retired driver named Frank Delgado, and he'd been hauling freight for over 40 years. He claimed to have a list of locations across the western United States where drivers had reported paranormal activity. Rest areas, stretches of highway, truck stops, places where people had died alone, where tragedies had occurred, where the boundary between the living and the dead was somehow compromised. I sent him a private message asking if he'd be willing to share his list. To my surprise, he responded within hours. "I've been waiting for someone to ask," he wrote. "Most drivers don't want to talk about this stuff. They think it makes them sound crazy. But I know what I've experienced, and I know I'm not alone." He attached a document to his message. It was a spreadsheet, meticulously maintained, with over 300 entries. Each one listed a location, a date, and a brief description of what had been reported there. I scrolled through it, my stomach sinking. The rest area on I-84 was there, mile marker 96, with multiple entries spanning decades. The stretch of US 20 where I'd seen the ghost truck was there too. And dozens of other locations I'd driven past without a second thought. One entry jumped out at me. A truck stop in eastern Oregon, right off I-84 near Baker City. The description was simple. Shadow figures. Voices on CB, feeling of being watched. Multiple reports from 95 present. I'd stopped there, just 2 weeks before my experience with David. I'd pulled in late at night, grabbed a coffee and a sandwich, and gotten back on the road. I hadn't noticed anything unusual at the time, but now I wondered if I'd just been lucky. If I'd left before, whatever was there had decided to make itself known. Frank's next message came through while I was still reading the list. I put this together over the years, collecting stories from drivers I met on the road. Some of them wouldn't let me use their names. Some of them made me promise never to share it publicly. But I think it's important that people know, that they're warned. What causes it? I asked. Why are these specific places haunted? His response came quick. Death, loneliness, despair. These highways have been around for decades, some of them for over a century if you count the original wagon routes. Thousands of people have died on these roads. Accidents, breakdowns, exposure, violence, and some of them, the ones who died alone and afraid, they get stuck. They can't move on. They're trapped in that moment, in that place, reliving it over and over. I thought about David, frozen to death in his truck, calling for help that never came. About the driver on US 20, broken down on the side of the road, waiting for someone to stop. About all the others, hundreds of them trapped in moments of tragedy and fear. Is there any way to help them? I asked. Sometimes, Frank wrote. If you can make contact, if you can acknowledge them, sometimes that's enough to set them free. Like you did with David Kowalski. But other times they don't want to be helped. They're too far gone, too lost in their own deaths. And those are the dangerous ones. Dangerous how? They want company. They want someone to share their suffering. And if you get too close, if you let them in, they'll try to trap you there with them. I've heard stories of drivers who stopped at the wrong rest area, who answered the wrong call on the CB, and were never seen again. Officially, they're listed as missing persons, runaways or victims of foul play. But I think they're still there, at those locations, trapped just like the ghosts they tried to help. I sat back from my computer, my mind reeling. People trapped by ghosts. Drivers who'd vanished trying to help, only to become ghosts themselves. How do you know which ones are safe to help? I asked. You don't, Frank wrote. That's the problem. You can't tell the difference between someone like David who just needs to be acknowledged and something darker that wants to drag you down with it. My advice, stay away from all of them. When you feel that wrongness, that heaviness in the air, just keep driving. Don't stop, don't investigate, don't try to be a hero. But I couldn't do that. Not after helping David. Not after seeing the peace on his face when he finally understood that he could let go. What if there are more like him? I asked. What if there are other drivers trapped out there who just need someone to listen? Someone to help them understand what happened? Frank's response took a long time to come through. When it did, I could feel the weight of his experience behind the words. Then you have to be very, very careful. You have to learn to tell the difference between the ones who want help and the ones who want to hurt you. And even then you might get it wrong. You might stop for someone who seems harmless and find out too late that they're not. How do you tell the difference? The harmless ones are sad, confused. They don't understand what happened to them. They're still calling for help in the same way they did when they were alive. The dangerous ones are different. They're angry, aggressive. They don't ask for help, they demand it. They don't appear confused, they appear hostile. And they usually appear in groups, not alone like David was, but in clusters. Multiple figures, multiple shadows. I thought about the figures I'd seen on US 20, the way they'd emerged from the darkness on both sides of the road. The way they'd all been watching me. Not moving, not calling out, just watching. "I think I encountered some of the dangerous ones," I said. "On US 20? He asked. "Yeah, that stretch is bad. Really bad. Whatever happened there, it wasn't just one person dying. It was multiple deaths, maybe over years. The energy there is different. Heavier. More malevolent. What should I have done? Exactly what you did. Drove away. You were smart not to stop, not to engage. Some places, the best thing you can do is acknowledge that they're there, and then leave them alone." I thanked Frank for his time and his information. We exchanged a few more messages over the next few days, and he shared more stories with me. Tales of other drivers who'd had experiences like mine, who'd seen things they couldn't explain on lonely highways. One story in particular stayed with me. A driver named Marcus had pulled into a rest area in New Mexico late one night. He'd heard voices on his CB, multiple people all talking at once, all calling for help. He'd stepped outside to investigate and had seen dozens of figures standing in the parking lot. Men, women, even children. All of them translucent, all of them watching him. He'd gotten back in his truck and tried to leave, but his engine wouldn't start. He'd sat there for 3 hours watching the figures slowly move closer to his truck, surrounding it. They'd press their hands against his windows, their faces blank and expressionless. Finally, as the sun started to rise, they'd faded away. His engine had started on the first try, and he'd left without looking back. He quit driving after that, Frank wrote. Said he couldn't handle the thought of being trapped like that again. Last I heard, he was working in a warehouse somewhere, staying as far from highways as he could get. I didn't blame him. The thought of being surrounded by ghosts, unable to escape, was terrifying. But I couldn't quit. This was my career, my livelihood. And more than that, I felt a responsibility now. I'd helped David find peace. Maybe I could help others. So when my month off was up, I went back to work, but I went back smarter, more prepared. I carried Frank's list with me, memorizing the locations I needed to avoid, or at least approach with extreme caution. I installed a better CB radio, one with recording capabilities so I could document anything unusual I heard. And I started carrying something else too: salt, iron nails, a small vial of blessed water I'd gotten from a church. I know how it sounds, like something out of a horror movie. But Frank had told me that traditional protections sometimes worked, that there was truth buried in those old superstitions. So I kept them in my truck, just in case. My first run back was a simple one: Boise to Twin Falls and back, all during daylight hours. Nothing unusual happened. No ghosts, no voices, no shadows. Just a normal day of work. But on my second run, things got weird again. I was heading north on US 93, a long, lonely highway that cuts through the Nevada desert. It was just after midnight, the road empty except for me, when I passed a broken-down car on the shoulder. It was an old sedan, maybe from the 80s, with its hood up and its hazard lights flashing. And standing next to it was a woman, waving her arms, trying to flag me down. I slowed down, my instincts warring with each other. On one hand, this could be someone who genuinely needed help, a real person in a real emergency. On the other hand, Frank's list had an entry for US 93. Multiple reports of people seeing figures on the side of the road that vanished when approached. I pulled over about 50 yards past the car and sat there, watching in my mirrors. The woman was still there, still waving. She looked solid, real, not transparent like David had been, not shadowy like the figures on US 20. I grabbed my CB mic. "Breaker 19, this is Hart on northbound 93. There's a broken down vehicle at mile marker 112. Driver appears to need assistance. Anyone in the area? No response. Just static. I tried again, and this time I got an answer. A crackling voice, faint but audible. Copy that, Hart. This is Patrol Unit 7. We're about 30 miles south of your position. Can you stay with the vehicle until we arrive? Relief flooded through me. Highway patrol was on the way. I could stay here, keep an eye on the woman, make sure she was safe until help arrived. Roger that, Patrol 7. I'll keep her in sight. I climbed out of my truck and walked back toward the broken-down car, my flashlight in hand. The woman stopped waving and watched me approach. As I got closer, I could see her more clearly. Middle-aged, wearing jeans and a sweatshirt, her hair tied back in a ponytail. She looked tired and worried, but normal. Completely normal. "Thank you for stopping," she said when I was close enough to hear. "My car died and I can't get it started. My phone doesn't have any signal out here." "Highway patrol's on the way," I said. "Should be here in about half an hour. You okay? You need water or anything?" She shook her head. "I'm fine, just frustrated. I was heading to Jackpot, supposed to meet some friends, and now I'm going to be really late." We talked for a few minutes, just small talk, while we waited. She told me her name was Linda, that she lived in Elko, that her car had been giving her trouble for weeks, and she should have gotten it fixed sooner. Everything seemed normal. She seemed normal. I started to relax, started to think that maybe this was just what it appeared to be. A stranded motorist, nothing more. And then I noticed her shadow. It was wrong. The angle didn't match the position of my flashlight. Her shadow should have been falling one way, but instead it was pointing in a completely different direction. Like there was another light source that only she could see. I took a step back, my hand tightening on the flashlight. She noticed the movement and smiled, but it was wrong too. Too wide, too many teeth. "Something wrong?" she asked. "No," I said, backing up another step. "Just thought I heard the patrol car." "You're lying," she said, and her voice was different now. Colder, flatter. "You can see it, can't you? You can see that I'm not quite right." I didn't answer, just kept backing toward my truck. She followed, moving in that same wrong way the shadow on US 191 had moved. Not walking, but shifting position, like she was being cut and pasted through space. "Don't leave," she said, and now there were other voices joining hers, speaking in unison. "Stay with us. We've been alone for so long." I turned and ran. The truck was 50 yards away, and I covered the distance faster than I ever had before. I could hear her behind me, or them, multiple voices all speaking at once, all begging me to stay. I reached the truck and threw myself inside, slamming the door and locking it. In my mirror, I could see her standing in the middle of the highway, not moving, just watching. And around her, other figures were appearing. Shadows and shapes, all of them watching my truck. I started the engine and hit the gas, not caring that I was leaving someone behind, not caring that it might have been a real person who needed help. Because I knew it wasn't. I knew what I'd seen. The figures didn't follow, they just stood there in the highway, growing smaller in my mirror as I drove away. And after a mile or so, they vanished entirely, like they'd never been there. I called Highway Patrol on my CB, asked if Unit 7 was still heading to mile marker 112. The dispatcher said there was no Unit 7 in that area, that they hadn't received any calls about a stranded motorist. The voice I'd heard on the CB hadn't been real. Just another trick, another attempt to get me to stop, to stay, to become one of them. I drove straight through to my destination, not stopping except for fuel, and even then only at busy truck stops with lots of people around. I was shaking the whole way, my hands white-knuckled on the steering wheel. Frank had been right. Some of them were dangerous. Some of them didn't want help. They wanted company. They wanted to trap you in their moment, in their death, and keep you there forever. I updated my personal list that night, adding US 93 mile marker 112 to the locations I needed to avoid at all costs. And I made a new rule for myself. If I see someone stranded on the side of the road in one of these locations, I call it in, but I don't stop. No matter how real they look, no matter how much they seem to need help, I just keep driving, because the cost of being wrong is too high. And I'd rather live with the guilt of potentially leaving someone behind than become another ghost on that list, trapped forever in a moment of death and despair. It's been 6 months since that night on US 93. I'm still driving, still taking loads across the western states. But I'm more careful now. I trust my instincts more. When I feel that wrongness, that heaviness in the air, I listen to it. I've added 17 more locations to my personal list, places where I've felt that sense of something watching, something waiting. I avoid them when I can, and when I can't, I drive through as quickly as possible, my eyes straight ahead, my CB turned off. And sometimes, late at night when I'm alone on an empty highway, I think about David, about how I helped him find peace, how I gave him the answer he'd been waiting 20 years to hear. I think about all the others out there, trapped in their moments of death, still calling for help, still waiting for someone to acknowledge them. And I wonder, how many of them are like David, harmless and confused, just needing someone to listen? And how many of them are like the things on US 20, or the woman on US 93, angry and malevolent, looking for victims to share their fate? I don't have an answer. I don't think anyone does. All I know is that these highways are haunted, that the dead linger in certain places, trapped between worlds, unable to move on. And I know that I'll keep driving these roads because it's what I do. But I'll be careful. I'll be smart. I'll trust my instincts and Frank's list and everything I've learned. Because out here, on these lonely highways in the dead of night, the line between the living and the dead is thinner than most people realize, and sometimes that line disappears entirely. I've been driving trucks for 31 years now, and I thought I'd seen every kind of person this country had to offer. Hitchhikers with stories that would make your hair stand on end. Drifters who looked like they hadn't slept in weeks. People stranded on the side of the road with cars that would never run again. I'd given rides to some of them back when I was younger and more trusting. But after a close call outside of Reno in '98, I stopped picking up strangers. No exceptions. No matter how desperate they looked. That rule served me well for 26 years. Until last October when I broke it. Or thought I did anyway. My name is Dustin Hale. I'm 54 years old, been hauling freight since I was 23. Started out doing local deliveries in California, worked my way up to cross-country runs. These days, I mostly stick to the western states, running loads between Nevada, Arizona, and Utah. It's good money, and I know the routes like the back of my hand. The run that changed everything was supposed to be routine. I'd picked up a load of bottled water in Las Vegas, heading north to Reno on US 95. It's a lonely highway, cuts straight through the Nevada desert for hours without much civilization. Just scrub brush and rock formations and the occasional gas station. I'd done the run hundreds of times before. Nothing special about it. I left Vegas around 4 in the afternoon on a Tuesday, planning to make Reno by midnight. The weather was clear, temperature dropping as the sun went down. I remember thinking it was perfect driving weather. The kind of night where you could just zone out and let the miles roll by. The radio was playing some old country station out of Tonopah. and I had a thermos of coffee in the cup holder. Everything was routine. Everything was normal. By the time I hit Tonopah, it was full dark and cold enough that I could see my breath when I stopped for fuel. I grabbed a sandwich from the gas station, one of those pre-wrapped things that taste like cardboard, and stood outside for a few minutes stretching my legs. The night was clear, stars so bright they looked like holes punched in black paper. There was no wind, no sound except the distant hum of the highway. It should have been peaceful, but something about it felt off. Too quiet, maybe. Too still. I shook off the feeling and got back in the truck. Probably just tired, I told myself. You drive long enough, you start imagining things, start seeing patterns where there aren't any. I was about 20 miles north of Tonopah when I saw him for the first time. He was standing on the shoulder, thumb out, the universal sign for a hitchhiker. Middle-aged guy, maybe 45, wearing a brown jacket and jeans. He had a duffel bag at his feet and that look desperate people get when they've been waiting too long. I slowed down slightly out of habit, then caught myself and kept going. No rides, no exceptions. I watched him disappear in my mirror, just another person I'd left behind on a lonely road. About 40 miles later, I saw him again. Same guy, same brown jacket, same duffel bag. Standing on the shoulder with his thumb out, looking at my truck as I approached. I felt my stomach tighten. It couldn't be the same person. There was no way he could have gotten ahead of me, not in 40 miles, not without a vehicle. I slowed down more this time, staring at him as I passed. He looked exactly the same. Same face, same posture, same desperate expression. He even had the same small tear in the shoulder of his jacket that I'd noticed the first time. I grabbed my CB mic. Breaker 19, this is Hale on northbound 95. Anyone else out here seeing a hitchhiker in a brown jacket? Static. Nothing but static. I tried again, looking for a radio check. Anybody copy? More static, and then a faint voice, barely audible. Copy that, Hale. Haven't seen anyone. Road's pretty empty tonight. I thanked them and put the mic down, my eyes flicking to my mirrors. The hitchhiker was already out of sight, swallowed by the darkness behind me. I told myself it wasn't the same guy. Nevada's full of people down on their luck, and a brown jacket isn't exactly uncommon. It was just a coincidence. Two different people who happened to look similar. But I couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. 30 miles later, I saw him again. This time, he was wearing a different jacket. Blue denim instead of brown. But the face was the same. The duffel bag was the same. And he was standing in the exact same position, thumb out, watching my truck approach. I hit the brakes harder than I meant to, the truck slowing to maybe 30 miles per hour as I passed him. I stared at him through my window and he stared back, and for just a moment I could have sworn he smiled. Not a friendly smile, something else, something knowing. I sped up again, my heart pounding, 3 times. I'd seen him 3 times now, each time getting ahead of me somehow, each time waiting on the shoulder like he knew I was coming. I pulled out my phone and checked the dash cam footage. I'd installed the camera about a year ago, and it had saved me from more than one insurance scam. If this guy was really appearing multiple times, the camera would have caught it. I rewound to the first sighting and watched the footage. The highway stretched out ahead of me, empty. No hitchhiker, no person at all, just bare shoulder and desert scrub. I checked the second sighting, same thing, empty road. My hands were shaking as I checked the third sighting. I could remember seeing him clearly, could remember the blue denim jacket, the way he'd smiled at me, but on the camera, there was nothing. Just empty highway. I put my phone down and focused on driving. This wasn't real. It couldn't be real. I was tired, that was all. My mind was playing tricks on me, making me see things that weren't there. But when I saw him the 4th time, I knew I wasn't imagining it. He was standing in the middle of the road this time, not on the shoulder, right in the center of the northbound lane, blocking my path. And he was wearing the brown jacket again, the one from the first sighting. I slammed on the brakes, the truck shuddering as the ABS kicked in. I came to a stop maybe 15 feet from him, my headlights illuminating him clearly. He didn't move, just stood there, looking at me, his hand raised like he was asking me to stop. I sat there, frozen, my hands gripping the wheel. Up close, I could see more details. He looked familiar somehow, like someone I'd seen before but couldn't quite place. His face was weathered, lined with age and hard living. His eyes were dark, intense. He walked toward my truck slowly, deliberately. When he reached my window, he knocked on the glass. "I need a ride," he said. His voice was muffled by the window, but I could hear him clearly enough. "Please. I've been waiting so long." "I don't give rides," I said through the glass. "Sorry." He smiled that same unsettling smile I'd seen before. "You will. Eventually, you all do." "Who are you?" I asked. "How do you keep getting ahead of me?" "I'm not ahead of you," he said. "I'm exactly where I've always been. You're the one who keeps moving past me." That didn't make sense. None of this made sense. I reached for the gear shift, ready to put the truck in reverse and back away from him. "Wait," he said, his hand pressed against my window. "Don't you recognize me?" "Look closer." I did look closer, studying his face in the glow of my headlights, and that's when it hit me. I did recognize him. He looked like someone I'd known, someone from a long time ago. He looked like my brother. My brother Jake, who died 23 years ago, who'd been killed in a car accident on this exact highway, somewhere between Tonopah and Hawthorne. The memory hit me like a physical blow. Jake, at 26, full of life and plans, calling me on that October night asking for help. His voice had sounded strange on the voicemail, worried in a way I'd never heard before. "Dustin, hey, it's me. My car's making this weird grinding noise and I'm kind of out in the middle of nowhere on 95. Could you maybe swing by and take a look? I don't want to risk it dying on me out here. Call me back when you get this." I'd been hauling a load to Denver, was already running behind schedule. I'd listened to the message at a truck stop outside of Grand Junction, had every intention of calling him back once I made my delivery. But the delivery had complications, paperwork issues that ate up hours, and by the time I was free to call, it was past midnight. Too late to bother him, I'd thought. I'll call in the morning. But morning never came for Jake. The highway patrol found his car at 6 a.m., wrapped around a concrete barrier near mile marker 107. The grinding noise he'd mentioned had been his transmission failing. It had finally given out completely, and when it did, it locked up his rear wheels at 70 miles per hour. He'd lost control, overcorrected, and hit the barrier at an angle that sent his car rolling. The police said he died instantly. They said he wouldn't have felt anything, but I'd always wondered if that was true, or if they just told families that to make them feel better. I wondered if he'd had time to be scared, time to regret not pulling over sooner, time to wonder why his big brother hadn't called him back. "Jake?" I whispered, staring at the man's face in my headlights. He shook his head. "No." But I knew him. We met out here, on this road. He was looking for a ride, too. The temperature in the cab dropped suddenly. I could see my breath fogging in the air, could feel the cold seeping into my bones. "What are you?" I asked, my voice shaking. "I'm what happens to people who die alone on empty highways," he said. "I'm what gets left behind when no one stops to help. Your brother." He understood that. At the end, when he was lying in his car, bleeding out, waiting for someone to stop, He understood. Jake's accident was quick, I said. The police said he died on impact. The man smiled again, and it was the cruelest thing I'd ever seen. Is that what they told you? Is that what helps you sleep at night? You're lying. Am I? Or are you just lying to yourself? He stepped back from the truck. Your brother called you that night. Did you know that? Before the accident, he left you a voicemail asking you to come pick him up. Said his car was making a weird noise and he didn't think it was safe to drive. But you were busy, weren't you? You had a load to deliver. You didn't call him back. I felt like I'd been punched in the stomach. I had gotten that voicemail. I'd been in the middle of a run to Denver, couldn't stop to drive all the way out to Nevada to help him. I'd planned to call him back when I finished my delivery, but by then it was too late. He was already gone. How do you know that? Dad, that? I asked. Because I've been here a long time. I've seen a lot of people pass through. And some of them, the ones who left someone behind, who didn't stop when they should have, they see me differently. They see the person they failed to help. I stared at him, my mind reeling. So you're not real. You're just guilt. My guilt made manifest. Does it matter? He asked. Real, imaginary, guilt, ghost. Call me whatever helps you sleep. But I'm here and you see me, and that means something. What do you want from me? I want what I wanted from the beginning. A ride. Just one ride. That's all I've ever asked for. I looked at him, standing there in my headlights, looking so much like Jake that it hurt to see him. And I thought about that voicemail, about how I'd never called back, about how my brother had died alone on this highway because I was too busy to help. Every instinct I'd developed over 3 decades of driving was screaming at me to refuse, to put the truck in gear and drive away. This wasn't real. This couldn't be real. I was hallucinating or dreaming or having some kind of breakdown. Ghosts weren't real. Dead brothers didn't appear on lonely highways. None of this made sense. But I thought about the dashcam footage, the empty roads where I'd clearly seen a person, the way he'd appeared in 4 different locations, each time getting ahead of me in ways that defied logic. The way he looked exactly like someone I'd loved and lost. And I thought about the alternative. About driving away. Leaving him here, adding one more person to the list of people I'd failed to help. About carrying this moment with me for the rest of my life. Wondering what would have happened if I'd just been brave enough to say yes. This is crazy, I said out loud, to myself as much as to him. This is absolutely insane. Probably, Raymond agreed. But you're going to do it anyway, aren't you? I closed my eyes, took a deep breath, and made my decision. Get in, I said. The words felt heavy, significant, like I was agreeing to something more than just giving a ride, like I was opening a door that had been closed for 23 years, letting something in that I'd been trying to keep out. He smiled, and this time it looked almost genuine, almost human. He walked around to the passenger side, and I heard the door open. Felt the truck shift slightly as he climbed in, but when I turned to look at the passenger seat, it was empty. I'm here, his voice said from beside me, even though I couldn't see him. You just can't see me anymore. Not the way you saw me outside. I felt the seat shift again, felt the presence of someone sitting next to me. But there was nothing visible. Just empty space. Where do you want to go? I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. North, he said. Just keep going north. I'll tell you when to stop. I put the truck in gear and started driving. The highway stretched out ahead of me, empty and dark. I kept checking the passenger seat, but it remained empty. Yet I could feel him there, could sense his presence like a weight in the air. We drove in silence for maybe 20 minutes. The highway unwound before us, empty and hypnotic. I kept my eyes on the road, but I was acutely aware of that presence beside me, that weight in the air where Raymond sat, invisible. "It's strange," he said finally, breaking the silence. "Being here, but not being seen. I've spent so long trying to get people to notice me, and now that you've let me in, I've become invisible again. There's an irony in that, I think. How long have you been out here?" I asked. 32 years, you said?" 32 years, 4 months, and 17 days. You lose track of a lot when you're dead, but some numbers stay with you: the date you died, the number of cars that passed you by, the number of faces you saw through windows, people who looked right at you and then looked away. What's it like, being stuck like that?" He was quiet for a moment, and when he spoke, his voice was distant. "It's like being trapped in a single moment, but you're aware of all the time passing around you. I can see the seasons change. I watch the highway get resurfaced, watch the mile markers get replaced. I see cars change, from the boxy sedans of the 90s to whatever those sleek electric things are that people drive now. But I'm always in that same moment, always dying of thirst, always desperate, always trying to flag someone down. That sounds like hell. It is. But you know what the worst part is? It's not the dying over and over, it's the hope. Every time a vehicle approaches, every single time, I think, this is it. This is the one that will stop. And when they don't, when they drive right past me or through me, it's like dying all over again. 32 years of hope and disappointment, over and over and over. I swallowed hard. "Why did you look like Jake to me?" "I told you. I appear differently to different people. To most drivers, I'm just a stranger. Generic, forgettable. But to some, the ones who carry guilt, I become something more specific. I become their regret made visible." He paused. "Your brother isn't the only person you've failed to help, is he?" The question hit me harder than I expected. I thought about all the stranded motorists I'd passed over the years, all the people standing on shoulders with their thumbs out. I'd told myself I was being smart, being safe, but was I? Or was I just being afraid? "There was a woman," I said slowly. "About 10 years ago, outside of Elko. Her car had broken down, and she had 2 kids with her. Little ones, maybe 5 and 7. I slowed down, almost stopped. But it was late and dark, and I didn't know her, so I called it into highway patrol and kept driving. I gripped the wheel tighter. I found out later that it took them almost 2 hours to reach her. 2 hours those kids sat in a cold car, scared, while their mom tried to keep them calm. They were fine, eventually. But I think about those 2 hours sometimes. Wonder what I was so afraid of." "You were afraid of what might happen if you stopped," Raymond said. "That's human, that's normal. But it doesn't make it right." "No," I agreed, "it doesn't." We drove on. The stars wheeled overhead, and the desert stretched out on either side of us like a dark ocean. "Your brother didn't blame you, you know. At the end, when he was dying, he wasn't thinking about the voicemail or the fact that you didn't come. He was thinking about the good times, the summers you spent together as kids, the way you taught him to drive. He was at peace." I felt tears burning in my eyes. "How would you know that?" "Because I was there. I saw him. We all see each other out here, those of us who got left behind. We're all connected in a way." "Are you saying Jake is out here too? Like you?" "No." Jake moved on. "He didn't get stuck like I did, like the others. He had people who loved him, who mourned him. That matters. It helps souls move on." He paused. "I didn't have that. No one mourned me. No one even knew I was missing until weeks after I died. "What's your real name?" I asked. Raymond Kowalski." The name hit me like a punch. "David Kowalski's brother? You know about David?" "I know a driver who helped him find peace." Raymond was quiet for a long time. When he spoke again, his voice was thick with emotion. "David's gone? He's not here anymore? He moved on. Someone listened to him, acknowledged what happened to him, and he was able to let go." "Good," Raymond said softly. "That's good. He deserved peace. He was a good man." "What about you?" I asked. "Can I help you the same way?" "No, it's different for me. David died waiting for help. I died because someone actively chose not to help. That leaves a different kind of mark." "What happened to you?" "I was hiking out in the desert, about 15 miles east of here. Got lost, ran out of water. I made it back to the highway eventually, but I was in bad shape. Dehydrated, delirious. I tried to flag down cars, trucks, anyone, but it was night and dark and people didn't stop. Either they didn't see me or they didn't want to take the risk." He paused. "One truck did slow down. The driver looked right at me. And then he kept going. I died 6 hours later, still trying to get someone's attention." "I'm sorry," I said. "It was 32 years ago, April 1992. I've been here ever since, waiting for someone to stop. And now you have. So, what happens now?" "Now I get to finish my journey. I was trying to get home to my wife. She was pregnant with our first child. I never got to meet my daughter." His voice cracked. "But maybe, after all these years, I can finally rest." The air in the cab was getting colder. I could see frost forming on the inside of the windshield, could feel ice crystals forming in my breath. "Stop here," Raymond said. I pulled over onto the shoulder. We were in the middle of nowhere, nothing but desert on all sides. The headlights illuminated scrub brush and rocks, and beyond that, just darkness stretching to the horizon. "This is where I died," he said. "Right here, on this spot." I looked around, trying to see what made this particular stretch of highway different from any other. But I couldn't see anything special about the location. Just empty highway and dark desert. No memorial, no marker, nothing to indicate that a man had lost his life here. "I can still remember it so clearly," Raymond continued, his voice soft and distant. "The way the sun felt when it came up that morning. I'd been out here all night, and I thought sunrise meant I was saved. Thought someone would see me in the daylight. But my vision was already going by then. Dehydration does that. Makes you see things that aren't there. Or maybe it makes you see things that are there but shouldn't be." "What do you mean?" "I saw my wife, standing right there, about 20 feet off the road. She was smiling at me, holding out her hand. I knew it wasn't really her. Knew she was back home in Reno waiting for me to call, but she looked so real. So I walked toward her thinking maybe if I could just reach her, everything would be okay." He paused. "I made it about 5 steps before I collapsed. Lay there for another hour before my heart finally gave out. The whole time, I could hear cars passing on the highway. Could hear the whoosh of their tires on the asphalt. But none of them stopped. 'I'm sorry,' I said, and I meant it. 'I'm sorry you had to go through that alone.' 'We all go through it alone in the end,' Raymond said. 'Death is a solitary business, but it's the dying that's hard. That's when you want someone with you. When you want a hand to hold, a voice to tell you it's going to be okay.'" I thought about Jake again, about him in that car, broken and bleeding. Had he been conscious at the end? Had he been scared? Had he wished for someone to be there with him? "Thank you for stopping," Raymond said. pulling me back to the present. "Thank you for finally stopping. Will you be okay?" I asked. "Are you at rest now?" "I think so. I can feel it pulling at me now, that place where the others have gone. It's warm there, bright, nothing like this cold, dark highway." He paused, and when he spoke again, his voice was filled with wonder. "I can see them. David's there. He's waiting for me, like he said he would when we were kids. Said we'd always look out for each other, even after death. And there are others, too. People I knew, people I've forgotten. They're all there, and they're calling me home." I felt tears burning in my eyes. "Go then, go to them. You've waited long enough." "There's one more thing," Raymond said. "Your brother, Jake. He wants you to know something." My breath caught. "Jake is there? You can see him?" "Not clearly. He's further in than the others, deeper into that light. He crossed over properly, didn't get stuck like David and me, but he's there and he has a message for you." Raymond's voice was getting fainter now, like he was speaking from a great distance. "He says to tell you that the grinding noise wasn't the transmission. It was the wheel bearing. It would have failed whether he was driving fast or slow, whether he kept going or pulled over. There was nothing you could have done. Nothing anyone could have done. It was just his time." The tears were flowing freely now, running down my cheeks and dripping onto my shirt. "Tell him I'm sorry. Tell him I should have called back. He knows, and he forgives you. He forgave you the moment it happened." Raymond's voice was barely a whisper now. "He says he's proud of you. Says you've lived a good life, helped a lot of people in your own way. And he's waiting for you when your time comes. But not yet. You've got more road to cover first. Raymond, I have to go now. Thank you, Dustin Hale. Thank you for giving me what I needed most. Not a ride, not really. Just acknowledgement. Just the knowledge that someone finally saw me, finally stopped, finally cared enough to help. That's all any of us really want in the end. To be seen, to matter. You matter," I said. "Your life mattered. Your death mattered. You mattered. I know that now. Finally, I know." The temperature returned to normal, suddenly, all at once. The frost on the windshield melted away, running down the glass in small rivulets. The weight in the passenger seat lifted, and I felt the presence beside me dissipate like morning mist. And I knew, without looking, that Raymond was gone. But before he left completely, I heard one last whisper, so faint I almost missed it. "Tell Rachel I loved her. Tell her I tried to come home. I will," I promised. "I'll tell her." I sat there on the shoulder for a long time, just breathing, just processing. Then I pulled out my phone and called my sister. It was late, almost 1 in the morning, but she answered on the 3rd ring. "Dustin, what's wrong?" "Nothing's wrong," I said. I wanted to say I'm sorry about Jake, about not being there when he needed me." She was quiet for a moment. "That was over 20 years ago. We've talked about this. It wasn't your fault. I know, but I needed to say it again. I needed you to know that I'm sorry. I know you are. And Jake knew you were too. He never blamed you, Dustin. None of us did." After I hung up, I sat there for a while longer, staring out at the empty desert. The truck's engine hummed quietly, and somewhere far off I could hear a coyote howling. The sound was lonely and wild, and it seemed to echo the way I felt inside. I thought about Raymond, about how he'd spent 32 years waiting for someone to acknowledge him, 32 years of being invisible, being ignored, being left behind. And I thought about Jake, about that voicemail I'd never returned, about how he'd died alone on this same highway, The guilt had been with me for so long it felt like part of my DNA now, but Raymond's words stayed with me. Forgiveness starts with forgiving yourself. Maybe it was time to try. I pulled up my phone and opened my email. I typed slowly, hunting and pecking on the small keyboard. "Dear Rachel Kowalski," I wrote. "You don't know me, but I think I met your father tonight." I told her everything. About seeing Raymond on the highway, about giving him a ride, about how he'd finally found peace after 3 decades of waiting. I didn't expect her to believe me. I didn't even know if the email would reach her, if she still used the address I'd found in my research. But I needed to tell someone. Needed to make his story real in a way that went beyond just my own memory. I sent the email and started the truck. The road north to Reno looked the same as it always had, just a ribbon of asphalt cutting through the darkness. But it felt different somehow. Lighter, like something heavy had been lifted. The next morning, after I'd made my delivery and checked into a motel for some sleep, I got a response. "My mother told me about my father's death," Rachel had written. "She said he died trying to get home to us, that he got lost in the desert and no one stopped to help him. I've hated this highway my whole life because of that. Hated every driver who might have passed him by. But if what you're saying is true, if he finally found peace, then maybe I can start to let go of that hate. Thank you for stopping. Thank you for being the one who finally helped him." I read her email 3 times, tears blurring my vision. Then I closed my laptop and tried to sleep. That was 3 months ago now. Since then, I've driven US 95 maybe a dozen times, always watching for Raymond, always half expecting to see him standing on the shoulder with his thumb out. But he's never appeared again. The highway looks normal now, just another stretch of road through the Nevada desert. I did make one change, though. I started carrying emergency supplies in my truck. Water bottles, blankets, a first aid kit, flares. And I put a new sticker on my CB radio, right where I can see it every time I reach for the mic. It says, "Stop for the stranded. Call for help. Be the one who answers." I still don't pick up hitchhikers. Some rules exist for good reasons and the world is still a dangerous place, but I do stop for people who are clearly in trouble. Broken down cars, accidents, anyone who looks lost or afraid. I stop, I stay at a safe distance, and I make sure help is on the way before I leave. Last week, I pulled over for a family whose minivan had overheated outside of Beatty. Dad, Mom, 3 kids, all of them looking worried and hot. I gave them water while we waited for the tow truck, let the kids sit in my air-conditioned cab. The father tried to give me money, but I waved him off. "Just pay it forward," I told him. "Next time you see someone who needs help, be the one who stops." He promised he would. I think about Raymond sometimes, late at night when I'm driving through empty country. Wonder if he found his brother David on the other side, if they're together now after all these years of being separated by death and distance. Wonder if Jake was there too, waiting to tell me that everything was forgiven, that I'd done enough penance. I like to think they are. I like to think that wherever Raymond went when he left my truck that night, it was somewhere warm and full of light, somewhere he could finally rest after 3 decades of wandering. And I think about what he taught me, that the ghosts we carry aren't always supernatural. Sometimes they're made of guilt and regret, of all the times we should have helped but didn't, all the moments we chose fear over compassion. Those ghosts can haunt us just as surely as any spirit, can weigh us down and follow us for years, but they don't have to be permanent. Forgiveness is possible. Redemption is possible. Sometimes all it takes is one act of kindness, one moment of choosing to stop instead of driving past. I carry that knowledge with me now, every time I get behind the wheel. Every mile I drive, every person I pass. I remember Raymond standing in my headlights, asking for the one thing he'd been denied for 32 years. A simple act of human kindness. A ride home. I haven't seen Raymond since that night. Haven't seen any hitchhikers on US 95, real or otherwise. The highway looks normal now. Just another stretch of road through the desert. But I carry Raymond's story with me. Carry the knowledge of what he went through, dying alone because people chose not to stop. And I think about Jake. About that voicemail I never returned. About all the ways we fail each other without meaning to. I still don't pick up hitchhikers. The risk is too real, the world too dangerous. But I do call in every stranded motorist I see. Every person standing on the side of the road looking lost or afraid. I report them to Highway Patrol, make sure someone comes to help. Because I learned something that night. I learned that the ghosts we carry aren't always the ones who died. Sometimes they're the ones we left behind. The people we could have helped but didn't. And those ghosts, the ones made of guilt and regret, they can haunt you just as surely as any spirit. Raymond Kowalski died on April 12, 1992, on US 95 in Nevada. His body was found 3 days later by a road maintenance crew. He was 34 years old. His daughter was born 2 months after his death. His wife named her Rachel, the name they'd picked out together. I know this because I looked him up after that night. Found his obituary online, found news articles about his death. It was all real. He was real. And he'd been waiting for 32 years for someone to stop. I'm just glad I finally did, even if it was 32 years too late.